across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. Very much appreciate you joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great to have your company today. Though I know an awful lot of you, like a lot of us here, will be sort of, feeling the loss of our wonderful, wonderful colleague and friend, James Well, as MBE. He knows I don't approve of awards, and I said it to him on the day he got it, but he was so proud to get an MB, and if you're going to give an MB out, he was the man to get one. So a really, really great loss, not just to our family here at Talk, because he's been here since, October 2016. He's one of my sort of oldest colleagues here. I worked with him also at LBC many, many years ago as well, and so we did a handover every day together. I actually got to see him in the office when we were on that station, but an absolute titan of broadcasting, the father of the phone-in, and an absolute tragic loss. We're going to be talking to two really good friends and colleagues of James's a little bit later in the show. Lizzie Cundy, of course, a regular on his shows, but also, one of his closest friends in the world, and also the brilliant Tony Blackburn, of course, also a good friend and old colleague as well. Anyway, if you do miss any of this show, don't forget you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. We made it an easy way of finding it. You hit subscribe and you'll never have to miss a thing. First, of course, we're also going to be talking about this one-in, one-out deal. It's a pilot scheme between Britain and France. We found out about it a few weeks ago, and it's actually going to start this week. It's coming to force. The first migrants who come on a boat, pay a few grand to a people smuggler, are going to get off the boat and find themselves detained and then facing deportation to France. So we're not going to have a problem returning them, we're told by Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, because France is going to agree to take them back. It's not a problem of trying to get them back to Afghanistan or Somalia or anywhere else you might refuse to take them. But we are still only talking about a pilot scheme. Apparently, it's only set to last 11 months. Is it going to be upscaled after that? Is it going to even last that long? And only realistically up to 50 migrants returned each week. So is that really what we're looking for to solve the problem? Well, we'll talk about that in just a moment. Plus, the Office for Budget Responsibility has warned that immigration on the scale it currently is creating a strain on public services. And they've urged Labour to tackle worklessness at home rather than relying on bringing in people from abroad, because if that worked so well, we'd be doing brilliantly now, wouldn't we? And Keir Starmer has put pressure on police chiefs to release more information about offenders as unrest has been growing over the government's handling of the migration crisis. Government sources suggested it would help rebuild public trust. And this, of course, stems from the issues we had about a Southport attack. But then, of course, one suspect being named as a white suspect. But obviously the question is that information only given out on ethnicity or background if they are someone who's British and white? And of course we've had a couple of suspects involved in rape and sexual assault cases been identified as being from people who have come on the asylum seeking route on the migrant boats, and locals, I think, understandably alarmed by that. Well, we're going to talk about all that, plenty more besides, and joining me for all the chat today is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Very good morning to you. We're going to get straight into, the small boats and the latest abject nonsense on that. But of course, I mean, you've been part of the Talk family for quite some time. We never let you escape, and you'll know obviously of James Well. Now the thing is, I suppose you're of a generation, Tom Slater, where you've grown up where, I mean, it's this phrase, the shock jock thing. People call me a shock. I'm like, oh, shock jock. I always say, if you listen to the show, he loved being called shock jock, James Well. But this is something that was sort of imported from America. But it was really just starting out in America when James Well started doing it here. But you've kind of grown up with it as the norm, probably. But I suppose for your generation, it's hard to sort of realise what a sort of revolutionary he was in terms of how he changed British broadcasting forever.
No, absolutely. Such a towering figure in broadcasting, as you've been saying. The king of the phone-in, bringing that kind of early American style, really kind of rambunctious, argumentative, devil's advocate sometimes kind of style of broadcasting, which is often treated with a kind of sneering attitude sometimes. But not only is it provided a tremendous amount of entertainment for people over the years on James's show as well as many others. But also, I think it's important for discourse to have that kind of lively debate, to putting people through their paces. I think my experience with James Wells, very similar to other people, incredibly warm personally, but as soon as the on-air sign goes on, he's going to really...
Because actually there are a lot of famous names who are really nice on air and absolutely horrible off air. And we've seen quite a lot of exposés about that. And BBC and we're not going to name it. Anyway, but he was genuinely... I mean, on air, he could be so rude to people. I mean, just so... and he and I disagreed on lots of issues as well. And he and I would go, hammer and tongs, I can't believe you said that, anyway, see you tomorrow, But you never let it get in the way of personal relationships. But crucially, behind the scenes, he was absolutely lovely to people. I mean, no nonsense, but, didn't suffer fools. But it was lovely to hear a lot of the sort of newer presenters on the station, some younger, some, some the same age, Russell, but talk about how encouraging he's been to them, and people don't forget that.
No, absolutely, it counts for a lot, and the fact that so many of the tributes that were going out on Talk yesterday from people who worked with him on the production side, through to other presenters, that was the message that you got from everyone, which I think says a lot about the man.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be talking to the wonderful Tony Blackburn in the next time. We're also going to be talking to his great friend Lizzie Cundy a little bit later as well. Look, let's talk about small boats. I can't believe they're going to be quite the same tributes to Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper in the years to come. I'm very surprised. Basically, this migrant deal we heard about from Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron at their summit, which Keir Starmer was basically on his knees in the behind the closed doors going, please give me the deal before you leave after the summit. I need something to show for it. This deal comes into force from today, but the first detention is set to begin by the end of the week. Now, the cunning plan is that we've got a load of migrants coming from France who aren't from France, but we're going to detain, we're told, up to 50 a week in this pilot scheme that runs for 11 months. Don't know why 11 months, but there we are. And then they're going to reassess it, and maybe they upgrade it, maybe drop it, might fall beforehand. But about 50 a week are going to come here, and in return, we're going to take 50 asylum seekers who apply legally from France, who've got not only they've been legally they've been vetted, criminally vetted and all of that, but they've also got a stronger claim to be here. Apparently that includes sort of knowing someone here, which is great. I know people in loads of different countries, so I just apparently go live anywhere I want. And then everything will be fine and dandy, and that message will get across, and people will stop paying people smugglers to come here. This is patently a load of nonsense, isn't it? If it were every single person who arrived here was detained and then sent back to France, I mean, you could solve this problem in a matter of weeks. I mean, literally, it'd be gone. Half the people turning up in France wouldn't bother turning up because they know, well, I'm not going to be able to get to Britain. We know that something like 30 or 40% of people who arrive in Europe, their aim is to get to Britain eventually because we're seen as a soft touch. So if we weren't a soft touch, you were detained and not put in, my local Holiday Inn, as asylum seekers have been put in, then it wouldn't be an issue. However, not only are we going to only return 50, we're going to take another 50 people. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that those 50 people will be the one main family member. And then we get all of their family. Many of these families come from countries where it's quite the norm to have 3, 4, 5, 6 children. Their other half, probably their brothers and sisters, probably their cousins, certainly in the years to come, will be eligible to come because they'll know someone in Britain. And we've also still got, roughly on average, 800 people a week coming on the small boats. And there's nothing to deter them. This is not going to deter people coming on the boat. So we're going to end up with 50 come in of the 800. Those 50 get sent home, so we've got 750. But we're going to get another 50 back, so we're back up to 800, plus all their family members. So we're probably going to be up to about, 1,200 plus. I'm not sure this is a good deal for us, Tom.
Why are you so surprised? I mean, the deal-making skills of Keir Starmer are second to none, as we know, and he's managed this time around to produce something. It's not clear as it's anyone's interest, certainly not our own. I mean, this was originally sold as one in, one out, which I think to a lot of people who are concerned about immigration, even standing still doesn't sound like a particularly great proposition. It turns out, because it's only 50 a week that we're looking at, it's more like 17 in, one out. And then you have this question, as you say, about families. Yvette Cooper's been quite quick, the Home Secretary, this morning to say that, however many people come over, the equal number of people we sent in the other direction. Yeah. But at the same time, there's how the courts get involved. There's
we've already got the threat of
right
legal
to family
action.
Life, legal action, all that kind of thing means that it could easily end up being just as you say. And what's fascinating about this is, like, even if this works perfectly on its own terms, it won't touch the sides, which I think is this government summed up on.
No, this is the thing. We have announcement after announcement on things, and they always seem, even I mean, I see this announcement under embargo on Sunday for Monday. We discussed it on the show yesterday, extra £100 million for builder security. And we all just go, yeah, here we go. And again, well, if you've been in power for a year and we've seen a 49% increase in the number of people coming in the same time period of this year as compared to last year, you might have thought of spending that money sooner and hiring some more border security guards. I can't imagine you just pluck them off the tree and get them starting on Monday as of yesterday. It just seems to me to be, they're just, as you say, drop in the ocean stuff. This is about headlines. This is about no, don't worry, we're doing something, and they think we won't notice when nothing really changes, when people are noticing. I mean, there's some amazing stats out about in terms of, we saw the stats last week about the extra, was it 700,000 more people come to this country. And areas like my local council, Camden, we have had a 2% increase purely from immigration to our local population in 1 year. In 1 year, 2% more people. So that's a huge 1 in 50. That's a huge increase. And these people coming to live in my local neighbourhood in just 1 year. Well, we haven't built that many new homes. We haven't got more parking spaces on the roads because the roads are all, jam-packed. We haven't got more buses. We haven't got more doctor surgeries, more hospitals. We haven't got more schools suddenly propping up. So where are all these people going? It's no wonder the Office Budget Responsibility, the financial watchdog, has said, immigration is piling unsustainable pressure on public services. And that's the legal migration. People who are supposed to be coming here as an economic benefit. And they're saying we need to be relying on our own workless people to get their act together. But the cost of the illegal migration, although it's on a smaller scale, is huge and rising exponentially in terms of the cost of these 4-star hotels and the long-term benefits these people are on and the legal challenges, you name it.
And it's so fascinating how quickly this debate is moving on as well, because arguments that previously would hear you shouted down as some kind of sinister xenophobe are now being
far right, racist, bigot, yada.
We all remember that all the old tunes are now being said by leading figures at the Office for Budget Responsibility, people who for many years, whenever people would say quite commonsensically and correctly, in a country in which we're not building anything, bringing hundreds of thousands of people in each year is obviously going to put a strain on housing, is obviously going to put a strain on public services. They would come and stroke their chin and say, actually, if you look at my spreadsheet, it doesn't
totally
work. And now saying, no, actually, you were right about that. And also, public opinion is hardening. There was that story in the Times this morning, and writing up a YouGov poll.
The Times, which is pretty pro-migration.
Absolutely, and pointing out about 50% of the population, or almost 50%, want a moratorium on immigration and recent arrivals to be sent back. So this is...
people are done. They're not all far right. They're not all Tommy Robinson.
And what's interesting is you've now got the kind of establishment, the think tankers, the national newspapers are having to respond. Yes, it's a bit partial, it's a bit late in the day. It's a little bit meek in certain quarters, but I think that's telling of how
I think it's extraordinary to see change. And again, Keir Starmer, although I can't remember because he regretted saying it, regretted not saying it, regretted saying he'd said he'd not said it. But the Island of Strangers remark, difficult to keep up whether he does agree with it this week or not, or whether or not women have a penis this week or not. You never know with Keir Starmer. But yeah, the fact that he even would say those words, I think was very telling. But certainly on the legal migration, the mass off the scale, there's an extra million here, an extra 700,000 here, an extra 650,000 here, nothing to see here. They think we wouldn't notice for years, and they told us it was an economic benefit. And there are many people, because I have rows with people who write in and call in, and people want, still insisting, no, you're quite wrong. I'm going to make a complaint to Ofcom or an article you write in the Sun. I'm going to make a complaint to IPSO that this is. You cannot say that the majority of migrants who arrive are not an economic benefit to this country when it's patently obvious from the facts that they are not. If mass-scale legal immigration was an economic benefit to a country. We've had it since 1997. We have had flatlined growth for much of that time, certainly since 2010, and it was put on steroids by the Tories in 2010. Instead of taking it down to in the tens of thousands, as David Cameron promised, it actually went up and up and up. And again, Boris Johnson was the worst offender on this and should be out of all prospect of ever returning to public office on that fact alone, among every one of his other sins. And he did it without telling us as well, which is even worse, having told us the exact opposite in public. That we'd be the booming economy of the world if immigration delivered that. It clearly doesn't, and we're supposed to have a points-based system where we're choosing the brightest and the best.
I mean, it's also absolutely clear now that what the immigration lever, the reason it's been pulled so many times by successive governments, is to kind of try and cover up for a lot of economic decay, problems in the labour market, the fact that so many people, including now young people most alarmingly, have just been put out to pasture, not working, sickness benefits, all the rest of it. The fact that you had an economy which never properly recovered from 2008, and therefore you kind of superficially inflate the GDP figures by just bringing more and more people in. Meanwhile, GDP per head, the thing that people actually feel in their own lives, their own living standards, has continued to flatline.
But even then, because we often have comparisons like with American states, so we're poorer than I don't know, Arizona or something. Even per head, that is still an average. If you've got billion, I mean, we know, the rich, the very very rich, have got a lot richer. The people most of whose wealth is not, it's wealth, not income. Those people have got a lot richer in recent years. That is an extra big lump sum of wealth, right? But the average income of people are poorer. There are very, very few people in this country, apart from the very, very, very top earners, who are quite completely insulated from these things, who since 2010 have not been just getting slowly poorer. The quality of life, what they can buy with the income they've got, what they get in return for it, whether it's housing, whether it's buying okay, some things have gone down in cost, but white goods over the years, might go to a washing machine cheaply, but in terms of your car, your food shop and everything, all that's gone up.
No, and also they've experienced many millions of people real terms pay cuts over the years. Again, since 2008, things not properly recovering. You then look at the cost of accommodation, the cost of housing, the cost of energy, every single area, it's all gone up. And this is something which makes people's frustration with the immigration system and frustration with just the way society is going even more acute. They're paying higher taxes than they have
for worse public services, out of less money.
Meanwhile, they read in the papers over the weekend that more and more asylum seekers are being given free NHS passes. It's these things, you put it together, this is a recipe for social conflict, and hopefully this is the point at which you will actually see a bit more responsibility from this government to try and pull back. But I just think that this Labour Party, kind of any Labour Party, but this one maybe in particular because it's run by human rights lawyers, is kind of constitutionally incapable of dealing with this issue. It will try to come up with little technocratic fixes around the edges like this one in, one out.
To appear to deal with the issue.
But they can't.
No, not only can they not, they can't because they're not, I don't think they're clever enough. I think they're not. But the main reason they won't do it is they don't actually believe it's a problem. We discussed this on the show yesterday as well. I don't mean to bang on the same subject, but we've got the same problems today as we had yesterday. They're still here. They genuinely don't really think it's a problem. They might say that they think it's a problem. They might say they're going to do something about it. And then, of course, people worried about this are not racist and bigots. And they don't think that. When they have private conversations, they think we all are. I can assure you of that. I want to hear from you. Give us a call. Britain's one-in, one-out pilot scheme to return boat migrants to France begins this week. Realistically, it's only going to see 50 migrants returned each week. It might be upscaled, it might end up being brilliant, but we're still going to get other people here who I'm not entirely sure we want here. Give us a call. What is your reaction? 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. Tell you I definitely don't want here, and I don't care how much people think I'm a terrible human being, is these 300 Gazan children who apparently are very sick and need health care, and they're going to be given health care here on the NHS. We've already had a handful who've come through and had private health care. But this is going to be on the NHS because, of course, we have no waiting list on the NHS for any British children. Absolutely not. Everything's absolutely fine for them. No child is dying from waiting for cancer treatment or getting to see a GP. Of course they're not. So, of course, we're going to treat children from abroad. They will be a priority. Yvette Cooper, yesterday on radio today, was asked, do you expect any of these 300 children to stay? And she said yes, they do expect some will stay. The answer, of course, is they will all stay, pretty much, and their families, and then they will bring more of their families in, and then we have a whole load of people British people, I don't believe, have asked and wanted to have come to this country. I'm all for these children getting treatment. It's awful. Any child. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your skin colour is. It's utterly irrelevant to me. We want every child in the world to be treated. But we're not bringing children in from Yemen and Sudan. I don't know why. Well, those kids apparently don't matter. But if we want those children treated, why don't we give them money, raise it privately? I'm sure there are plenty of people who march down the streets on a Saturday in London who wear their little cafes and everything. Don't buy a new cafe, put that money towards medical treatment for children from Gaza, and we can send them to Qatar. Qatar's very big on Hamas. They care very strongly about the Palestinian people. So why don't we pay for Qatar in their fabulous first-class, state-of-the-art hospitals, treat those children there, rather than the NHS taking them on? It seems to me to be a very, very humane and reasonable solution, no?
Absolutely, but as we all know, those countries that might claim to care about the Palestinians, they really don't. They've shown that time and time again. Not only if you're Qatar in terms of supporting Hamas, the terror group that is oppressing the Palestinians of Gaza, but also the neighbouring states, which again like to posture against Israel or the West. But when it comes to, for instance, Egypt potentially opening its border to, say, women and children so that they can escape the conflict in the way that happens in any other conflict, it's not going to happen. So it really shines a light on the hypocrisy of many of the players in all of this. And as you say, legitimate concerns that even something as simple or seemingly as circumspect as just offering treatment to Gazan children, because of our insane human rights laws and so on,
they're going to stay.
Because we had those employment tribunal cases recently where you saw, again, attempts at claims being made, despite the fact there is no Gazan refugee route that has been sketched out, that has democratic...
Trying to use the Ukrainian route.
Exactly. All of this, it's making these things even more fraught than they would have been previously.
Absolutely. There's so much more I want to talk about, including all-out war in Gaza. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But also, my favourite story of the day, a zoo asking for people's unwanted pets to be given to them so they can feed them to captive predators. I mean, there's some dogs in my neighbourhood. Bit barky late at night. I wouldn't have a problem with them being fed to the local lion at London Zoo. I'm just throwing that out. We're going to talk about that a bit later. I want to hear from you. There are calls coming in thick and fast. What a surprise. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to give your reaction to that one in, one out scheme. 50 migrants in, 50 migrants out, except it's going to be more than 50 migrants in, isn't it? Do you think it's ever going to be upscaled? And will it ever make a darn bit of difference, any dent in the roughly 800 a week who turn up on our shores and who we are still paying for? This is Talk.
Government needs to stop being a government of lawyers and actually tackle the immigration system, the tribunals, look at international laws and properly come up with a scheme that will actually deal with this and kill it dead, rather than just performative words like stop the gangs and then preside over an ever-increasing number of arrivals to this country. We just can't afford it. It's not like Rachel Reeves has left the economy in such a wonderful state that we can invite the world here to come and share in our prosperity.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:27 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's still with me, and you are on the phone lines and on the texts and the tweets about this one-in, one-out migrant deal that's just another pretend sop to our, obviously far-right concerns about being invaded. Clark says, spoiler, none will be forced to return. It'll be voluntary because we've paid them or something. Then they will just come back on a boat anyway. Clark, you have nailed it. Could you try and have a word with the vet keeper, the Home Secretary, who doesn't understand this stuff? Fred says it's not one in, one out. It's only 50 a week. For an extra 100 million to France, it's hardly a bargain. Now, the extra 100 million was on our border security, Fred, which is basically now a boat service for migrants. George says it's farcical. How does one in, one out reduce the numbers? And who exactly will the French be sending over as the one in? And Patricia says, this government needs to get a backbone now. Kevin says, rolls over, goes back to sleep, wake me up in 2029. Gabby says, it's like a card trick, which is so bad. Everyone sees the move. We need closed borders. We are full. Let's go to Michael, who's on the line in Birmingham. Michael, thank you so much for calling. What do you want to say?
Yeah, well, first of all, very sorry about James Whale. Makes me feel very old when these people from my childhood are passing away.
Yes, he's been around all of our lives, hasn't he?
Yeah, I was very sorry about that.
Yeah.
But equally, I was going to say, isn't it funny how this government is very selective about which laws it applies? So we can't turn the boats back because that's against international maritime law. We can't kick people out of the country because of ECHR. We police right-wing riots, so they call them, but don't police left-wing ones. Yeah. Don't take people's face masks off. But apart from all that, we recognise Palestine, which is against international law. But if you notice the way that these non-applications and applications of the law seem to be, it's all seemed to be the liberal lefty causes, we don't bother with the law for that.
Yep.
But anything to do with migration, we've got to follow the law to the letter.
What can we do? We've got no choice. Oh, you've completely nailed it, Michael. And that's the thing. They all pick and choose. And at the end of the day, if you want to do something, you've got a mandate from the British public to do it, and the security and economic necessity of doing it, well, then you change the law. Because otherwise, what's the point? It's this idea that laws are immutable. They can never be changed. No, otherwise let's not bother electing MPs anymore.
Yeah, so, governments are there to change laws and make laws, aren't they? It seems to work very well over in the US. I know we keep using that as an example, but it's executive orders and bang, OK, if they get challenged, fine, they just take them to the courts and they win.
But Donald Trump has basically eliminated illegal migration on the Mexican border. Friedrich Merz, the new he's supposed to be a lefty, SPD Chancellor of Germany. I didn't hold out much hope for him. And he's managed to cut by 50% asylum entry, economic migrant entrance to Germany since he's been in power. 50% in the space of like a month or two.
You called it right when you said before, Julia, in one of your points you made earlier. The bottom line is, it's not that they don't see anything wrong with migration, the Labour Party. They just actually support it. They want population replacement. They want to bring these people in. Yeah. They can see how mad it is, but, they don't think it's mad at all. That's exactly what they want. Whether it's payback for colonialism, for Brexit, or a combination of
whatever it is.
That's precisely what they want.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you. Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate that. Tony is on the line. He's in Lancashire. A very good morning to you, Tony.
Morning, Julia. Hope you're well.
Very well indeed, my darling. What do you want to say?
I just want to say, if we can identify these people that shouldn't be here, and they've got to be pretty nasty people for us to get rid of them, why are we only sending them back to France and not back to where they came from?
Because we can't get people. No. But Tony, you know this. We just come on. You've obviously not been paying attention, Tony. We can't send them back to Afghanistan or some of these places. A, the human rights lawyers won't let us do it, and B, those countries won't accept them.
So that means then they go back to France. They've got three options then. But you said France can't send them back, so they either put them in prison, but they haven't done anything to put them in prison for, but they have put. They won't, which means they get released and go straight back to the beach and jump on the next boat.
Yep, they couldn't hear. The phone line's a bit fuzzy there, Tony. The people who are either, they go to prison, they won't. They send them back, they can't. They're going to get back on the boats and try to come back to Britain. And that's exactly what they're going to do. And then we're going to still have the other 50 plus their family members as well, plus the other 750 who turned up that week. It's a brilliant plan, isn't it? Tony, thank you so much for that. Apologies for the quality of that line. 10:32 is the time. We're going to take a quick break right now. And next up, we're going to be talking to Deputy Editor of the Conservative Home website, Henry Hill, about this and all other big stories in the news. And I do want to know from you, would you give a pet you no longer want, who's got pets they no longer want, to a zoo for them to feed to the lions? This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:35 is the time. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Tony Blackburn, the broadcasting legend, to talk about, of course, the wonderful broadcasting legend that was James Whale, who lost his life to cancer, sadly, yesterday. First up, though, let's stick with the politics with Henry Hill. He's Deputy Editor of the Conservative Home website and joins us now. Henry Hill, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. What do you make of the government's cunning latest wheeze, announced, of course, during the Macron summit a little while ago, for this one-in, one-out policy for the small boat migrants? We're told it's just a pilot scheme. It's only 11 months, but it could be expanded. The government isn't giving any official numbers, but we've been told we're looking at around 50 a week coming in and then 50 a week going out. But of course, does that include the family members of those coming in? And what about the other 750 who turn up every week? What do you make of it?
I mean, in theory, you can see the merit of it. Obviously, on the face of it, one in, one out doesn't reduce the number of people coming in here at all. It simply means that we're trading people who don't have a right to be here for some people who do.
Well, again, do they have a right to be here? This is the government's judgment.
In theory, in the government's logic, I mean, you can interrogate that later. But in theory, the government, in principle, it would be people who'd have a right to be here to people who, under the current system, the government does think have a right to be here. But that means it would disincentivize people from making the Channel crossing, because really, most of them would not be up for making that journey in order to get somebody else the right to live in the UK.
Well, no, but hold on a minute. Again, that would work if if it was 800 in, 800 out.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say.
But it's a fraction.
The number, yeah, but that was what I was coming to, which is that the numbers are, the concept, in theory, it's a bit like Rwanda, right? Rwanda would have been a really workable plan if if they could have guaranteed that everybody who came here illegally went to Rwanda.
Exactly.
Because then you would have not been guaranteed a place, you would not have got a place in the United Kingdom, and there would have been no incentive. But if you're dealing with a tiny, tiny fraction of the people coming over here, then the odds are simply too good. Right,
Yeah.
like you need to do something to really crush those odds of coming here, so that if someone's making a gamble with their lives about crossing the channel, they don't think the odds are worth it.
Well, exactly, and that's the thing. The amount of risk that people have often taken to get to the Calais beaches, and the risk they take. Although I'm led to believe that actually a lot of people are simply unaware of how risky that journey is. They think it's much shorter than it is and much less dangerous than it really is. I'm amazed actually how many people do survive that journey realistically, given this busiest shipping lane in the world and these overpacked boats. But again, we know that the pilot scheme isn't going to work. Now the government is saying they're going to review it in 11 months' time. I don't know why 11 months or why not sooner. I mean, you'd know early on whether it was going to work. But the reality is it's going to be for want of a better expression, a drop in the ocean of the numbers we've got. But we also may end up with more people, because I'm assuming with each one of these people with a right to be here, people who are applying from France, well, you get one of them, but then you also get their husband or their wife, their children, their brothers, their sisters, their elderly parents, their cousin, their second cousin, their brother-in-law. We're going to end up with more people, not fewer. But we're supposed to say, oh no, but these are legitimate people. As far as I can gather, other than the fact they've been security checked, how do you security check someone who's arrived from Afghanistan or Somalia, realistically? But also they say, but they're people who've got a right to be here because they have links with Britain. I don't see why, because someone has a second cousin living in Leicester, that gives them a right to come and live in this country. I'm utterly befuddled by that.
I mean, I agree with you. And I think that the ultimate problem here is that politicians are again trying to find ways to look busy and show the voters that they're taking action on this issue without addressing the fundamental problem, which is Britain's legal commitments and treaty commitments, which currently don't allow us to set an annual cap on the number of asylum claims we take, because if somebody with a legitimate claim comes and presents themselves, we don't have the right to say no. And what you're talking about is the most problematic of all, which is Article 8 of the ECHR, the right to family life, which becomes a right to family reunification. And it means that it's a snowball effect.
Yeah.
A couple of months ago, there was talk about Labour asking for a Gaza resettlement scheme, right?
Yeah.
And the argument made by the people advocating for that scheme was there are only a couple of thousand people in Gaza with direct family links to the UK. Well, fine. But if they came in, they would suddenly have direct family links to an awful lot of people in Gaza.
Yes, but also, there's a small point worth making, and everyone can cry, whatever they want about it, but we are talking about one of the most radicalised populations on the planet. And even when you look at the 300 Palestinian children from Gaza they want to fly in who are very ill and need treatment, their family's going to come here. No one in their right mind thinks any of those families are going to go, I'll go back to Gaza now rather than staying here and living a life on benefits, or if they're able to work here. But there's nothing because you've got a sick child that means that you're not a part of Hamas or radicalised or not supportive of jihad, rampant anti-Semitism and the destruction of Israel. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't think it's a good idea for us to bring any of these people here.
And it would have been cheaper to fly them to somewhere like Egypt and pay for private medical care there.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not, the Middle East is not some barbaric wasteland. Countries like Egypt, they have hospitals.
Well, Qatar are so supportive. They desperately care about the children of Palestine. They go on about it all the time. Well, you've got first class hospitals. Treat some children. I don't even want our money to pay for it. I think if we've got spare NHS capacity or spare money for the NHS, I'd rather it treated British children. I'm done now. It's not our job to be, the nurse to the entire world.
Well, for the NHS, you can absolutely make that argument, because the thing is, if you were using the foreign aid budget, which does exist, and Labour does want to spend it, and assume that Labour, you might agree with the decision, but if Labour's going to spend some of that money on Gaza, fine, send them to hospital. When I was in Oman in January. Oman has first-class private hospitals, and compared to somewhere like Britain, they're dirt cheap, right? It's a relatively short flight. Send them there.
I tell you what would be really embarrassing. Someone comes over with a sick Palestinian child and they get to this country and the Gazan family said, you know what, this is so bad, we'll go back home. We've got better chances. That would be embarrassing. I'm making light of it, and I don't want any child to, anyone to be suffering. Of course not. But the question is, why is it our problem when the whole of the Arab world apparently are desperately caring about the plight of the Palestinian people? Well, then do something about it then. It's not our problem. Well, I love the fact that we're colonialist if we get involved, apart from when it's our money and our resources that are being used, when apparently we're doing the right thing. Let's talk about stuff back home there. Let's talk about, I mean, linked to the immigration issue, of course, is the massive concern that people have about illegal migrants, who some of whom have been convicted, some charged, some arrested, and obviously there's different states at play in terms of whether we know whether they're guilty or not. In terms of some very serious sexual assaults, even rape of a 12-year-old, and people who've been identified as having been people who've arrived on the migrant boats and living in local asylum seeker hotels. Obviously reasonable for local families to be concerned. And we've had Nigel Farage in a press conference yesterday for Reform talking about how, there must be more information given out. We need to know ethnicity, we need to know immigration status. I mean, for me, the immigration status is the main thing I want to know about people who have been arrested or suspected or charged with a crime, certainly convicted. And we've had Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, this morning, echoing the Prime Minister, saying they agree that more information should be given about criminals to rebuild trust. But the problem we've had is often the information, we don't get full information unless, let's face it, it's a suspect is a white British man, when, of course, the information is given out very quickly.
Well, the reason for that, it's actually quite interesting, is it's all a kind of outworking of all things, the Public Order Act 1986, which is, one of those cases when it was a Thatcher era law that's now being applied in a way that I don't think anyone really intended. That act is the one that says that the authorities and the police, when they're assessing whether or not something is likely to stir up racial tension, they can think about whether or not a hypothetical person who heard it would be offended or riled up, which means that it allows the police, amazingly, to basically look at something, invent somebody in their head who'd think that that was offensive, and then rule that it was offensive. That's why so many newspapers and television stations are so careful about naming an ethnic minority criminal when they do not show the same hesitation to name, as you say, a white criminal. That was obviously not, I think, the intent of Margaret Thatcher's government when they passed that law, but that is nonetheless where we are at the moment.
But again, it's a belief from the authorities that people are just going to go out, we're all just such ghastly racist bigots, we're just going to go out and start sort of, bombing asylum hotels or our Asian or black neighbours because of this. But the thing is, what people are angry about is the feeling that we're not being told the full truth. Now, we've not been told the full truth about, the migrant boats. We've not told the full truth about asylum hotels, about the cost, local accommodation and things like that. We've not been given the full truth. People are quite right to believe we're not being told the full truth. A refusal to give the ethnicity and immigration status of many criminals once convicted, even while in prison. We had to drag that out of the Home Office through freedom of information, kicking and screaming. And there's a reason why they've not published it, because they'll happily publish it. You'll find out how many black people go walking in the countryside. You apply to join your local library, or they'll ask you, your sexuality and your ethnicity, for goodness sake. But apparently they haven't got a way of knowing it when someone goes to court or goes to prison. We know we've been lied to, and that's why people believe there's a cover-up and they want full information.
The absolute golden rule on a cover-up is that you need to make sure no one knows there's a cover-up going on. Right? The moment that people suspect it, you've already failed. Every effective cover-up that's ever happened, you and I and nobody else has any idea that they happened, because they don't know that there's anything to cover up.
And the awful thing is, Henry, there are an awful lot of those.
Potentially, we genuinely wouldn't know, because that's when they say the cover-up is worse than the crime. Because you get caught. I think the golden rule in this case is if you're so worried that merely having the public know accurate information about the results of your policies would create riots, let's assume, take their belief, would create riots, racial tension, that means your policies are failing, right? And
exactly.
that you need to change them. And the fascinating thing is, was it last year or a few months ago, Yvette Cooper conceded that the government would start publishing more crime data on the ethnic backgrounds or nationality backgrounds of criminals. Now, this is a really great example of how governments like Starmer's and, in fairness, like the previous Conservative government, they get overtaken by events. Because fine, okay, that's a concession. But the problem is, once they start publishing that information, there's going to be quite a lot of pressure for them to start, doing something with that information.
Yeah, and that's why they don't want us to know it. Absolutely, as you nailed it, though. If you're that worried about the result of people knowing the facts, that's the actual problem. Henry Hill, always so good to talk to you. Thank you so much. He's Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Appreciate that. Tom Slater is still with me, editor of Spiked Online. We're just talking about people behind bars in prison. I will come back onto that topic a little bit later. But I just want to ask you about something else that came up in that Reform press conference from Nigel Farage yesterday. And I've been, as I said on air yesterday, been rowing with him on WhatsApp about this. It was Vanessa Frake, a big friend of this show, a former prison governor. She's going to look at their prisons policy. And she was asked about trans identifying men, let's call them what they are, being put behind bars in women's prisons, which is still the case, not just in Scotland, but in England. There are still some men behind bars, outrageously out of risk to women prisoners right now. And Nigel Farage basically said he'd be led by her, but she said basically this should be dealt on a case-by-case basis. Now, I've said to him, this isn't a case-by-case basis issue. This is it's a black and white question. Should men be housed in women's prisons? And the answer is always only the word no. Kemi Badenoch has called him out on it, pointing out that the Tories have a policy. Not they did anything about it when they were in power, but she was certainly trying to do something about it. She's called him out on this. This could be a real vote loser for him, couldn't it? Because women like me feel very strongly about this issue.
And it was a totally unforced error on his part. I mean, even when he was going through the process of appointing Vanessa Frake, this was going to be a question that any broadcaster was going to bring up. The fact that it happened on Times Radio, I think, was telling. Even a kind of station which isn't as interested in some of these issues, potentially, it's not necessarily their bread and butter. We've had the Supreme Court ruling, which has said that women
they're not allowed to be,
and men's spaces should be separated, and that men can be excluded from women's spaces if it's proportionate to do so. There is clearly a overwhelming public opinion behind excluding men from particularly women's prisons, but women's spaces in general, and to not have worked out what Frake's position was on this, and also to seem quite kind of wrong-footed in the press conference, was a bit unusual.
Love you, Nigel, but a lot of middle-aged men who don't really understand quite how serious an issue this is, and a bit sort of, it's like Andrew Neil being a bit late to the party on this. And actually, you know what? This is a battle that real women are facing on behalf of their fellow women, and those of us who've got teenage daughters feel quite strongly about women's safe spaces.
And Reform have said this isn't party policy.
No, they said it's not party policy.
But at the same time, why did you? It was such an unforced error, which opened things up.
Well, you know what, Nigel? It's going to have to be party policy, and it's going to have to be the right one, because that is a serious vote loser for an awful lot of us. You need to get your cards in order on that one. 10:49 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be hearing from the legend of broadcasting, who is Tony Blackburn, talking about our late legend of broadcasting, the wonderful James Well. This is Talk.
government needs to stop being a government of lawyers and actually tackle the immigration system, the tribunals, look at international laws and properly come up with a scheme that will actually deal with this and kill it dead, rather than just performative words like stop the gangs and then preside over an ever-increasing number of arrivals to this country. We just can't afford it. It's not like Rachel Reeves has left the economy in such a wonderful state that we can invite the world here to come and share in our prosperity.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:53 is the time. We're going to talk now about the late, the great, the very great James Whale. He sadly lost his life to cancer after, 20 years of battling cancer, and certainly the last few years knowing that it was going to be fatal. He lasted so much longer, thankfully, than many of us feared he would, but sadly he lost his battle yesterday at the age of 74 to kidney cancer. So many tributes have been paid to our wonderful colleague and friend. We're going to be talking to the wonderful Lizzie Cundy later in the show, who's his close friend, but many broadcasters who became very good friends over the years have also wanted to pay tribute, and I'm delighted to welcome one such man, Tony Blackburn, OBE, to the show right now. A very, very good morning to you, Tony. I just wish it was under happier circumstances.
Yeah, so do I, Julia. Yes, I was very sorry to hear about James yesterday. I mean, as you said, he'd been unwell for a long time, and he did last a lot longer than I think a lot of us thought. 20 years he was struggling, I think, with this horrible disease. And what I think about him is he was so public about it as well. He was very brave, and that must have helped a lot of people. But I got to know him in the 80s when he had his television show, radio show on TV. Yeah. And
what a silly idea. Who would try and do that?
Well, I used to go there. We used to do it from, the north, but then we did it from Covent Garden. And I used to really enjoy doing the show. I don't know what the heck it was all about. I mean, it was chaos, but he was so different. That's what I loved about him. He was so different. Yeah. I mean, and of course, he was such a pioneer in a lot of things. I mean, he started the Top Shop radio station, for goodness sake. And then, of course, being on, he was a shock jock. Yeah. He loved being a shock jock.
But this is the thing. A lot of people, I mean, the younger generation, Tom Slater in the studio, and he'd been on his show. But, this was such a new thing to Britain, and it hadn't really developed that much in the States. He was the father of the phone-in. Now it's the norm. Loads of stations have phone-ins, and it's become, even the BBC gave into it, But he was the first.
He was. I mean, up until then, people would come on with on a talk show, and the presenter would be polite. James wouldn't take any of it. He spoke his mind, and that's what I liked about him. He was just different. Yeah. And I used to listen to his programs and listen to the programs on Talk, and I used to really enjoy them. And what I loved about him was that in the final days, he wasn't well. But he kept going. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing him a little while ago now at the Hilton Hotel. We were at some function. I said to him, "How are you, James?" He said, "Well, I don't feel too good." And but he looked all right at the time. Yeah. But he was so brave, and he did it so openly as well.
Yeah. I mean, we stayed on air as long as he could. It was his life. Yeah. He loved every second of being on air. And of course, completely looked after by the wonderful Nadine, his wife, who they found each other in later life, and a wonderful, beautiful relationship that is. But he kept doing the podcast, and I know Mike Graham and our boss Denny and others, and Jeremy Carr went to visit him, in his hospice, and he was still talking talking about needing to raise money for the hospice for other cancer sufferers, because that's something a lot of people don't realise. Like you're an OBE, he's an MBE, services to broadcasting, but also to charitable fundraising. He raised a fortune for people, and he was among the first to, a man talking about cancer of his age, of his generation, so openly, and asking, telling men, like, go to the doctor, and taking away the embarrassment of that.
Yes, I think that was very, helpful to people who sort of suffer from this horrible disease. And he was a trailblazer, and he was different. That's what I love about him. So many people nowadays, they don't speak their mind, but he did. Yeah. He spoke his mind, and he did a great program. And he was so frustrated about being unwell. I think that was the thing, because he wanted to do better, but he did his best, and he kept going for a long time. He did. And he'll be sadly missed by a lot of broadcasters.
Well, indeed. 71, again, I know he lasted 74 to die at 74. It's too soon. And certainly, this day and age, it's far too early. But it was a life well lived. I mean, he did everything. He had 2 wonderful children. He had a wonderful long marriage. Lost his first wife, of course, to cancer as well. And he did have Nadine. Lots of amazing friends, and his MBE celebration party. He was so proud of having his MBE. The people there. That was just a room full of very drunken people. Let's not lie, but also so much love for him.
Yeah. And he was a nice, when I did his television programmes as well, we used to sometimes go out and have a drink afterwards.
You surprised me, Tony.
Yeah. He was a very nice man. Off air, we didn't go out and just argue and he did all the rest of it. He was a very, very kind man.
That's something a lot of the younger producers and some of the presenters who are newer. I've known him since my days in another station in 2011, but obviously knew of him and watched his shows before. But he was so much sort of kinder than perhaps people just think he was, that rambunctious sort of, noisy character on air. But he was still like that. It wasn't fake. He was like that. But there was this tender, kind side. He looked after people. He encouraged people. He helped people.
Well, he couldn't have been like he was on air the whole time, otherwise he'd have had no friends. But he was a genuinely kind person. But on air, what he did was absolutely genuine. Yeah. And that's what I loved about him. There were 2 sides to him. But when you met him as a person and a friend, and went to have a drink with him, he was great company.
Yeah, and absolutely.
He'd be sadly missed by everybody, particularly in talk radio.
Oh, absolutely. The Office, you can really feel it today. Do you know what I think, though, is that someone, I've known him all these years, and he's a really good friend of some of the people, and there's been really, really close relationships, but every time someone talks about him, they have a smile on their face. And I think that is an incredible tribute to the man he was. So appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, Tony Blackburn, legendary broadcaster yourself, talking about our late legendary broadcaster, of course, James Whale. More tributes coming to him. If you want to give a call in and give your thoughts, your memories of James Whale, do get in touch as well. 0344 499 1000. So much more to talk about. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. We're coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. As I say, I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's lovely to have your company. Still also the company of the editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater, joining us in the studio. And don't forget, if you missed anything of the show or you missed anything of yesterday's show, you can go to my YouTube page. We called it, this is really clever, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Easy for you to find, no excuses. So if you go to YouTube, put that in, hit subscribe, and you never miss a thing. Now, first, of course, we do have to start with the sad news announced yesterday afternoon that our dear colleague at Talk and radio legend James Whale passed away yesterday, aged 74, after battling cancer. Now, James was not only a friend and a colleague to everyone here, but a pioneer in the world of radio. And he brought the shock jock genre to Britain, and he was, without a shadow of a doubt, an absolute trailblazer. He's going to be deeply missed by everyone here at Talk, and I know an awful lot of you as well. We've got more tributes from his friends and colleagues coming throughout the day. Also coming up in this, I'm going to talk more about that deal between Britain and France, one in, one out migrant deal. See how, well, what you think of that. Funnily enough, not impressed so far. I know, I'm surprised too. Plus the Office for Budget Responsibility, they're basically, the government's financial watchdog. They have said that immigration is creating a strain on public services. No, well, that's a bit bigoted for them to say that, isn't it? I thought we had to accept that immigration was a net benefit to the country. No, well, they can do the numbers and it's not. We've been telling you that for years. But they've urged Labour to target worklessness at home rather than relying on mass immigration to fill jobs. I don't know, I think I've been saying that since the year, 2000? But, there we are, don't get any thanks for that. Plus, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that a decision has been made to fully occupy the Gaza Strip, including operations in areas where hostages are held. The announcement comes after months of ceasefire and hostage negotiations between Israel, Hamas and so-called mediators in Qatar. We're going to be talking about all of that coming up. Thank you very much indeed for getting in touch. A lot of you already, particularly about the one in, one out pilot scheme. This involves returning boat migrants to France. It's going to, as of today, it comes into force, and the first returns apparently are going to be this week, but they won't be returned this week. What we're talking about is 50 of the 800 largely men of fighting age who will turn up on migrant dinghies this week. 50 of them, realistically, if we're lucky, will be detained as soon as they arrive. So that's, 2/3 of a boatload. I don't know which 50 we'll choose. I mean, we'll just see. Has anyone got a criminal record? Anyone here been with ISIS? Or anyone? Perhaps you might be the people we'll return. How will we know? Who knows? Anyway, they're going to take 50 into detention, and then they're going to return those 50. We're not quite sure how long that will take to France, and in return, France are going to give us 50 people who apparently are legitimate asylum seekers. We don't know what that means. People who have a link to Britain and a claim to be here. So they've got a second cousin living in Leicester. And so that means that they've got a right to come here. They will, of course, no doubt also be bringing their families, and those family members will bring their extended family members. And so we will end up, no doubt, with the 750 who've already come, the 50 who, and minus the, then we've got the 50 who've been returned, plus the 50 who are going to come here under the official scheme, plus all their family members. So we're going to end up with more people, but they'll be the good kind of asylum seeker, not the wrong kind, i.e. the economic migrants. So it's all okay and nothing to see here. Happy with that? Give us a call. Tell me whether you are, whether you aren't. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. And of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. I mean, Tom Slater, are we happy with that? Simple question.
Of course not. I mean, this is going to achieve precisely nothing. That's why it makes it seem almost pointless rather than even necessarily a bad idea.
What if it's scaled up, though? What if all 800 who turned up were sent back to France and we took another 800, quote, legitimate asylum seekers?
The idea that it's going to even exist beyond the 11 months that it's been sketched out for it is not entirely clear. I mean, this was signed up to under Emmanuel Macron. French politics is as restive and all over the place.
I imagine the French people will be thrilled to have these people back as well.
Absolutely, and also a scheme that's obviously not really going to work. I mean, the whole theory here is that even you don't necessarily need to deport everyone who enters the country illegally, but enough of them so that it breaks the incentive. It makes the odds just a little bit more stacked against the person who's thinking about making that very perilous journey.
When Australia did it, it was everyone.
But
everyone.
The Home Office is already briefing out. This is the Home Office officials. These are the mandarins. Story in the Times today saying that we reckon it needs to be at least 8 in 10 in order to properly break its business model. What we're talking about here is 1 in 14. So even on their own sums, on their own numbers, this doesn't add up.
Okay, but they're saying it's a pilot. They're saying it's a pilot scheme.
And do we really think that it's going to be expanded after that point? Do we really
well,
think
we're told
that
France has agreed to it. We're told the EU has given the say-so. We know Friedrich Merz in Germany. I mean, he's cut his own migration since being... He's only been in office a couple of months, 50%. Because basically he said to the border guards, stop letting in, basically, young men who are turning up saying, oh, I'm an asylum seeker. Basically, on any spurious ground, just don't let them in the country. Problem solved. I mean, that's the thing, because the reason why people were travelling across Europe en masse, remember back 2015, was basically Angela Merkel said, oh, you know, the doors are open. And the whole of Eastern Europe went, oh, gee, thanks, Angela, really appreciate that, as they had thousands upon thousands of people trekking through Europe. But we know 30 to 40% of everyone who arrives in Europe as a supposed asylum seeker, mostly, almost entirely economic migrants, plan to come to Britain.
No, absolutely. And there's just no seriousness about actually taking the steps that are necessary to even bring this down within the legal confines that we currently have.
But there isn't, because they don't genuinely think it's a problem.
No, exactly. I think
they think the borders should be... Vet Cooper believes in open borders.
The thing is, it's not to discredit the idea that we need to get out of the ECHR, that we need to look again at our human rights legislation. I agree with all of that. The thing is, government still can act. You've seen that across Europe, where you've had centre-right, centre-left governments. Kind of doesn't matter. They've all recognised this as a problem. They need to get a grip on it. And even within their own legal confines have managed to find a way. The difference here is that this is a government run by human rights lawyers. Keir Starmer, human rights lawyers. Lord Hermer, human rights lawyer, who's asserted his right to essentially veto any legislation that he deems to be in contravention of international law. This is the problem. They're never going to be able to digest what is necessary in order to just start to carve out a reasonable policy.
They don't believe it's a problem. I keep saying this. Honestly, I've spoken to these people. I've known these people for years. I've interviewed them for years. Well, they couldn't come on anymore. Not that I think it's a big loss. They don't say anything of any use anyway. But they genuinely don't think that either mass uncontrolled legal migration or illegal migration is an issue. They really don't think it's a problem. They believe in open borders, that we should be open to the world. Diversity is our strength. They genuinely believe that our colonial white history is a bad thing, and that we are a nation of immigrants. I mean, all complete nonsense, provable nonsense. But they do believe it.
And yet it's something which I think shows that they just don't really think about this issue. They think and speak in platitudes about this particular issue. They act as if it was, 'twas ever thus, even though before 1999 we never had net migration over 100,000. I mean, it's one of those things where this is such a present era. There's and also I think one thing...
They're acting like this is the norm.
No, exactly. And so, therefore, why people are upset about it? It's because it's unprecedented in British history.
And not only do we not agree with it, you expressly asked us and we said no. At every election since you started doing it, we said no, and you carried on doing it.
The proportion of the population who are in support of the kind of net migration numbers that we're currently experiencing, it's in the single digits percentages.
Yeah.
Like, no one voted for this, no one wants this.
And
you're starting
people
to see
who
opinion really harden in a way that could actually be concerning.
And sort of long-time Labour voters, the people who Labour apparently like, because they don't want the bigots to vote for them, of course they don't. That's what they say, those aren't our people. But again, what they don't realise is it's their supposed people they're supposed to care about, working people who are being hardest hit, particularly people on the lowest wages. Why is it you can't earn any decent money being a delivery rider when there's all that money being made by Uber Eats and Deliveroo and everything? It's because they pay such low wages, because they know in the areas where this is like a massive thing, like big cities like London and Birmingham or whatever, they can get a whole load of illegal migrants to basically siphon off and subcontract the franchise and of doing the deliveries, and they'll do it for a pittance because they're working illegally. Illegal working and even legal migrant working, we know, brings down wages for Brits, and it brings down wages for not just your white indigenous Brits, it brings down wages for Afro-Caribbean Brits, second, third generation from the Caribbean. It brings down wages for Asians, second or third generation who've come here legitimately and built a life here, and who totally and utterly absolutely assimilated to this country. It brings down wages for everybody.
And it's one of those things where I think the politicians, if they weren't so slow on this, would start to recognise that the public are ahead of them on this issue. They have been for a very long time in terms of recognising what the problems are. Obviously, when you think about migration, there are forms of it which most people tend to support. The idea of actually joining a society because you want to buy into it, because you want to contribute. Those things are really uncontroversial. That's not what we've ended up with. With, again, illegal, not just cheap imported labour, but illegal imported labour in order to prop up the business model of some app which has made it easier for people to get pizza on a Friday night. This is not a positive success story.
Well, and the Office of Budget Responsibility making that point. Immigration is creating serious problems. They're the government's fiscal watchdog. I mean, these people, we've got a problem with the OBR already, is that they're pretty, woke-leaning.
Well, as soon as they came out and said this, it starts to make you think maybe they've got this wrong as well.
There is that. Or maybe immigration is a good... Yeah,
been,
exactly. Immigration is creating serious problems for public services and living standards, they've pointed out. Labour must prioritise getting Britons back to work instead of relying on overseas workers to grow the economy. I mean, there you go. I mean, we can't deal with debt. We can't deal with any of the issues we've got. We don't get all that done. And any government that came in that said they were going to seriously get that done, I think would be a vote winner. But you need to go full, Javier, was it? What is his name? Millet. I think brain's gone. I think of Bolsaro for some reason in my head.
Javier is his first name, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
you're
half right.
I was almost there. That's why I have Tommy, because he knows his stuff. But this is the thing. You need someone who's going to absolutely get to grips with it all. And if mass economic legal migration brought with it massive boost to the economy and riches for all, we would be sodding Singapore by now. And we would be Monaco by now. Yeah. We'd be so rich. We've had 10+ million more people arrive in this country. How's that working out for everybody?
I'm not an economist, but it's conceivable to me that there are situations in which a sensible managed migration system can be an economic boon, skills gaps and whatever.
Absolutely.
That's not what we've got here. We've had an economy which has been stuttering, flatlining, that never recovered from the 2008 financial crash, and then therefore to essentially paper over the cracks, you lean on cheap imported labour. It superficially makes GDP figures look okay, even though in terms of people's actually quality of life, it's actually on the down slope, and it covers up for the fact that, particularly over the course of the past 5 years, but it's been building for a longer time before that as well, whole swathes of the country, of the workforce, are now not working. They've just been put out to pasture, and this is another way of covering that up.
And there's no incentive to get these people back to work if you can always just import. People say, well, especially in London, well, I'd much rather have, me Eastern European, keen, probably with a postgraduate degree, perfect English often, working as my local barista, than some sort of stroppy, spotty 18-year-old who doesn't want to be there. Well, tough. Because we have to find housing for the other person, and we've already got housing for the 18-year-old, and that's the reality. And and there's going to have to be a kick up the backside, not just for young people who all think they're too anxious to go to work on a Monday morning. There's going to be a kick up the backside for them, and frankly, a kick up the backside for schools and for parents, because no. Not an option anymore. You can't be mollycoddling your kids. You're going to have to tell them. And also, we need to tell parents, part of your job is to bring up a contributing member of society. That is part of your job, and if you're not going to do that job, then we've got a problem. We also need people to have more babies here, as opposed to importing them. Let's also talk about what we find out about different offenders. Suspects who've been arrested, suspects who've been charged, and indeed those who are already convicted. Because Keir Starmer, after being pressured, I think, really crucially by Nigel Farage, a former UK leader, in a press conference yesterday, who's accused the police of a cover-up over the identity of two men who've been arrested for the alleged rape of a 12-year-old girl in Nuneaton last month. Warwickshire police have been criticised for failing to disclose their immigration status, but it was found out and it's been published. The two men who've been accused, of course not yet brought to trial for that alleged crime, are boat people living, arrived on migrant boats and living in an asylum seeker hotel. Lots of pressure for there to be more information released. Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper today as well, have both said that the police should be, authorities, everyone else should be as transparent as possible. Because this all came to the fore of Axel Rudikabana. It was a bit complicated by the fact that he was actually just under 18, and then the courts allowed us to name him. But the information that was given out, this sort of, Welsh choir boy, it didn't tally with the reality, and people knew they were being lied to, but that allowed an awful lot of complete lies on social media about him being an asylum seeker. He wasn't off the boats. He wasn't, and he was born in Wales, but he was born to immigrant parents from a war-torn area. This was relevant information. I think a lot of people felt. We did have when we had it in Liverpool a car which mowed people down. In that case, still going to trial, of course. So we need to be careful. The police very quickly said that the person who they had arrested was a white man born in Britain. And lots of us pointing out, well, hold on a minute, would you have said if it was an ethnic minority man, not born in Britain or born in Britain? And big question marks about that. But the fact that we're often not being given information about someone's immigration status, do we have a right to know that information? Is it relevant, Tom?
Well, I think it's becoming increasingly relevant in the social media age, in a time in which there is a hunger for information as soon as one of these horrendous attacks or crimes are committed. And I think the number one thing has to be consistency. You cannot have a situation in which a crime, if it's committed allegedly by a certain type of perpetrator, it seems to have been the case in Nuneaton, Afghan asylum seekers, that information cannot see the light of day. Whereas you have the alleged attack in Liverpool, the car attack, where that information comes out within hours. I think
minutes, actually.
This is one of those situations in which it makes people feel like they're really being gaslit and played, and also just projects such a low view of the public. We're not going to tell you information in this case because we're worried how you're going to react. We're going to tell you information very quickly in this case because we're worried about how you otherwise might react. Surely the question is to be both open, within reason for protecting
There'll be times
trials,
when you can't give the identity.
but consistent as well. And yes, there are going to be people who are not, unfortunately, trust is so broken down that maybe even that's not enough to make them believe what the
key thing
saying.
is,
But
the reason why they
those two
think
things
there's
will
going
help.
to be trouble if they give certain information is because they genuinely think they have utter contempt for the British public. I hold no candle for anyone who picked up a brick or threatened anybody in an asylum hotel or anything during the Southport riots last year. Absolutely disgusting behaviour. But I absolutely have sympathy for the mothers and many others who were standing outside peacefully asylum hotels and right now and saying no, we don't want these people here. But this is against the authorities. All protest has to be peaceful. But I think one of the reasons why people's emotions are riled up, I'm not excusing people's behaviour if they turn to criminality, but one of the reasons why people are riled up is because they do feel they are being lied to. And you say gaslit, and there's only so many weeks, months and years that you can treat the British public as if they are mugs. The people will put up with it.
No, exactly. And the thing is, the truth always comes out shortly afterwards anyway. And there's nothing to be gained, I don't think, from the authorities from being cagey where this information is concerned. The fact that they have responded so differently in so many different cases indicates this isn't a question of where the law is. These are individual calculations being made by police forces because they're fearful of the public reaction at any one particular point.
And also we know that the tops of police forces are now so completely and utterly befuddled by wokeism. You can't be a police chief. You can't get up the ranks now unless you play along with the wokeism. And they are more concerned about community cohesion than they are about the truth. And I don't think that's a good place for us to be in. I really, really don't. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that, everyone. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. And you can also send us a message on X at talkTV. We're going to get to your calls in just a couple of moments. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
it's a bit of a shock, isn't it? I mean, we're all expecting it, and yeah, it's a tough one, man.
How long did you work with him, Ash?
30 years, yeah.
So you probably knew him. You knew him in broadcast terms probably longer than most.
Well, yeah, definitely, yeah, and it was a great ride. I mean, I remember when I first got to work with him, they said we want you to do work with James Whale, and obviously, because when I was 18, I used to watch his show on the TV, and I thought, great, this would be exciting, and it turned out it was exciting.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:24 is the time. Thank you very much indeed for your calls. So many lovely messages, by the way, still coming in about James Whale, who sadly lost his life yesterday in his long battle with cancer. Tom said, I didn't get a chance, actually. We were talking with the wonderful, wonderful Tony Blackburn. I mean, talk about two, broadcasting legends, those two gents. Again, that's like my whole life flashing before me, the men I've been listening to on air. I did tell a story when I was on with Peter Carboy yesterday. We were sort of talking about paying tribute, our wonderful memories of James Whale, and as I just pointed out to Tony Blackburn, it's amazing when you talk about it, you do find yourself smiling, and it seems the wrong thing to do when a colleague and a friend has lost their life, but that's the wonderful impact he had on people. I mean, he was, I would say rambunctious is my favourite word I would use to describe James Whale. But I first met him. I just love you to know the story because it tells you everything about James and my relationship. I first met him in 2011, working on another station, LBC. I was the lunchtime girl, and I handed over to him at 4 o'clock every afternoon. And I think, frankly, he thought, oh, here's some silly middle class idiot, another one. And I'm a broadcasting professional, and he had very little time. And I think 2 or 3 shifts into us working on the same station, as I was coming off air, trying to sort of wrap up and talk to the audience, he stands in the glass in between the control room where the production team are and where I was, pulled up his top, this sort of mooby sort of, no offence, body, and just holds his t-shirt up, grins at me like a Cheshire cat while I'm on air. No one else could see, just me. Kept her straight, carried on. Came back, he came in the studio, he'd started his show. I did exactly the same to him, and I went in front of the control room. None of my producer's face now, he's looking horrified. None of the younger producers could see. I was standing in front of them. I pulled my top up, and I did exactly the same to him. I was wearing a bra. Now, I'm pretty sure that's a walk out the office, HR, sacked on the spot moment now. 2011, simpler, happier times. But I just stood there, stared him out with my top up, and he looked at me with a, yeah, you'll do, we're going to be mates expression on his face. And we were from then on. And that tells you probably a lot about him and me.
That's the best friendships are forged in a mutual flashing
Don't you
incident.
think? I think that's and I was messaging with him just a few weeks ago, and I reminded him of that. He goes, yeah, one of my happier memories, he said. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you because, that was James Whale. But honestly, yeah, just a fantastic man. But your messages, we are so grateful for the lovely messages that have been coming in about him. Thank you so much. Let's get to your calls, though, and you having your say on this mad one in, one out pilot scheme that's going to be absolutely useless and isn't going to make a darn bit of difference to the number of young men of fighting age coming over on boats, which we're now paying for as they live in their local hotels. Let's get to the phone lines. David's on the line from Runcorn. He's called in on 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Hello, hi, you okay?
Yeah, very well. Nice to talk to you, David. What do you want to say?
First, I just would like to pass my condolences on to James's family. He was a really good man, and obviously it's a horrible disease. I lost my father
I'm so sorry.
last year to it as well, so I know what it's all about, and it's not nice, so I just want to pay my respects.
So appreciate that. Thank you.
Obviously this one in, one out, like you say, it's just not going to work. You know, they can obviously, if they do get in, they're going to bring a relative and then the family members, and then we don't want that. We just don't want them here.
Yeah, why can't the government get that? Oh, no, we're going to get the good asylum seekers, the ones who are already in France and applying legitimately.
Yeah.
France don't want them, by the way. France don't want those people.
I know, that's right, and it's on everybody's lips as well. You know, everyone's saying we don't want them here, full stop. You know, there should be a naval ship in that ocean. As soon as they cross the border, we should put them on the nearest ship and send them straight back.
Yeah.
It's just getting out of control.
Why? Okay, question to you. I've explained why I think they've never done anything about it, including the Tories, including Boris Johnson, who was elected on a ticket, you know, including David Cameron, all of them. Why do you think they don't? Why do you think they don't stop the boats? Why do you think they don't think it's a problem?
I just don't think they're man enough to deal with it.
So you think they think it's a problem, but they just don't know what to do?
Yeah, I think they're turning a bit of a blind eye to it. I really do.
Yeah, they're not. Well, they're not living in hostels in their street, are they?
Well, that's it. You know, it's just mind-boggling that obviously we're allowing it to happen.
Yeah.
You know, we've got our own veterans on the street. They can't even get a roof over their head. But there we are, bringing these criminals. You know, we don't know the backgrounds on them, but they're getting free meals a day and they're getting mobile phones. They're getting a roof over their head.
Yep.
And it's disgusting. It's absolutely. It makes people's blood boil. Yeah. And it's getting to a point where people. It's that breaking point, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's really changed in just the last, I think, say, weeks or few months, hasn't it? There's just been that tipping point where people are going, right, I'm going to speak out about this. I might join a protest. I discovered, you know, a week ago that, you know, there's Asylum Hotel, you know, literally round the corner from me.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we had them in the Lord Aylesbury in Runcorn. It was a lovely, lovely hotel. And they absolutely trashed it. They did not. I don't know where they've been moved to. They've been obviously going into homes around Runcorn. They're still trying to integrate them, and we just don't want them. We just do not want them. We don't even want them touching our beaches.
No, absolutely. David, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you very much indeed. Again, that's one of the key points, you know, they're just not listening. Politicians just aren't listening. Let's go to Graham. He's in Kent. He wants to talk about this. I mean, Graham, you guys are at the sharp end in Kent, aren't you?
Certainly are. Yeah, we certainly are, Julia. Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
Just to say God bless to James and his wife Nadine. It's a very sad loss, and I grew up with him. And we'll be sorely missed.
Yes.
Coming on to Keir Starmer, what do we know about Keir Starmer? What we know is he can't think on his feet. He has to go to scripts.
Yeah.
And the other thing, he thinks he's a world international leader, likes to travel around the world, and he's desperate for that second term in government. Yeah. And what he's doing now is purely gerrymandering the electorate. It falls into his gift that, you know, all these people, he'll get them in here, he'll get them able to join the country, he'll get them able to vote. I expect he's going to come up with another little wheeze that non-nationals living in this country, they can have a vote.
Oh, they wanted, you remember this lot, when he was Shadow Brexit Secretary, they wanted the EU citizens to be allowed to vote.
Yeah, I can see him doing that, and it's purely...
I don't want to vote in Germany.
Yeah, I think we ought to call it what it is. It's clearly a situation where he's gerrymandering the electorate to try and get his next bit of power in this country. And, you know, we shouldn't...
Well, you know what? The Democrats were accused of doing that in America, and that didn't work out too well for them when actually an awful lot of people they assumed were their voters. You know, anyone who was an immigrant, you know, anyone was an ethnic minority, and they assumed.
Hello.
Graham. Oh, I think we've just lost that line. I'm so sorry, Graham. Sorry about that. Do call in again. Love to hear back from you. 11:32 is the time. Up next, going to be talking about that warning on, basically giving jobs, getting Brits back to work in jobs rather than bringing in mass numbers of people from around the world. Who's saying that? Well, the Office for Budget Responsibility. We'll talk to Liam Halligan about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk Home with Common Sense. 11:34 is the time. Tom Slater is still with us as well. Love to get your thoughts what our next guest has to say. Liam Halligan is an economist. He's also author of the brilliant Substack When the Facts Change, and author of numerous books as well on, frankly, the state of our economy. And let's talk, Liam Halligan, about the Office for Budget Responsibility. A very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia. Good to be with you.
Thank you very much.
Our official fiscal watchdog.
Well, yeah, I mean, these are the people, we trust to tell us, whether the numbers add up and all of this. Now, for many, many years, I mean, you and I, we worked many years ago in the House of Commons together, newspapers side by side. We've been told that mass immigration, the legal stuff, not the illegal stuff we've been talking about with the one in, one out policy, that is a boon to our economy. It's absolutely good. It raises GDP, it creates jobs, and it's going to be all part of our economic miracle. After, 20 plus years of mass uncontrolled immigration, it does appear our economy is still in the doldrums. This time, the Office of Budget Responsibility have basically said that unless the government gets to grips with this and cuts mass immigration, that it's unsustainable pressure on our public services, and the solution is to actually get workless Brits back into jobs rather than importing everybody from abroad. I mean, first of all, how surprised are you that the Office of Budget Responsibility has stated the sort of thing that people like me have been saying for 20 years?
I don't think they have a choice, because in the end, if they ignore what's completely obvious, then they lose all credibility. Yeah. Back in the day when we worked together in the House of Commons, Julia, as you say, in the late 90s, net immigration into the UK was between 50 and 100,000 every year. 100,000 would be a bold year. It was generally around 50,000. And I think it's all about a question of pace. Now, of course, we're getting net immigration above 500,000, above 750,000, above 1 million in recent years, which, of course...
Thanks, Boris.
Enormous pressure on public services, puts enormous pressure on our state, puts enormous pressure on our tax base, particularly when so many of the net immigrants are dependents, and we have increasing numbers, also, the OBR is correct, of Brits who aren't working as well. Look, I was listening to what you were saying to callers earlier this morning, and I think you're right. There has been a real change just in the last few months in the public mood towards a sense that immigration, which has been a massive part of British life, certainly since the Second World War, a long way before that. I'm a product of that wave of immigration from an Irish background. Grew up in an environment where almost all my mates were from immigrant backgrounds, and a very vibrant place it was, and we all contributed mightily to the economy. But the pace then was the pace what it was. We now have immigration that's 10, 20 times more.
But also crucially, that immigration was people, came from Ireland. Again, my grandmother came from Ireland, but they were English speaking. They assimilated. They became, joined the indigenous population. Even when we had, the Windrush generation, you're talking about people from the Caribbean who spoke English, largely shared the largely Christian beliefs of the British country as well. And again, on a tiny scale compared to what we've seen in recent years.
That's right, and that's why I think the OBR has had to change its tune, because even though at a certain pace, immigration really helps. You get vibrancy, you get labour. You don't get a fall in in income per head, which is what we've been in a GDP per head recession for the last 2 or 3 years.
Explain that, because a lot of people. I know you're a trained economist, but we talk about GDP per capita. What is it? What does it all mean? Explain
GDP per head. What it means is, GDP is the size of the economy in a single year, gross domestic product. When we talk about economic growth, Julia, we're talking about the growth or otherwise of GDP, and we've barely been growing in recent years. The States, they're growing at 3.5%, right? We're growing at 0.3% if we're lucky. With the GDP has contracted in the last 2 months since Rachel Reeves's massive tax hikes have really kicked in since April. And GDP per capita, all that means is income, economic activity per head. And when GDP, the economy is growing only very slowly when it's growing at all, but the population is growing like Topsy, then the cake, there's less of the cake for each individual person. We have to be focusing on growth. And for me, the way to get growth isn't just to keep importing more people, many of whom will be unproductive because they're dependents. The way to get growth, I think, is to not keep raising taxes the way we are.
But also to get our own people who aren't working back to work. We have an extraordinary number, particularly of young people, who are just already on the scrap heap of life, whether they're sort of unemployed or largely now claiming sickness benefits, who aren't sick. I'm sorry, they're not sick. If they were my child, they would not be too anxious to go to work on a Monday morning. Now, I completely accept some people do have mental health issues which aren't visible, and they are genuine issues. We'd be better off spending money giving them therapy, helping them, treating them, than we would be putting them on the scrap heap of life for the next 40, 50 years and paying for them that way. We need to get those people in work. And when people say, but I don't want to do this job, and employers say we can't get anyone to apply for this job, as I've always said, when you're hungry enough, you will be willing to do that job. There is no job that I think, other than, OnlyFans, not that anyone would want, I wouldn't make much money doing that. But there's no, then I would, if it's legal, work, I would, there's nothing I wouldn't do to put the food on the table for my family.
And I think this is what David Miles is getting at. So David Miles is one of the top 3 technocrats, if you like, at the OBR. These people don't speak out very often. They're not public figures, really, but they are in public life, and they're very important in public life. They set the parameters that allow the government to spend money or not spend money, frankly, because if the OBR says you're breaking your fiscal rules, love, to the Chancellor, then, it'll be politically impossible for her to do that. Financial markets will go haywire and so on. So for someone like David Miles, who I've known for very many years, he's a very canny academic, a proper card-carrying academic economist. He's one of only 3 members, Julia, of the OBR's Budget Responsibility Committee. And for him to speak out in this way, he's written an essay that all of us are talking about and reporting, basically saying we can't rely on ever more migration. We can't rely on importing people for growth. We have to, as you've just argued, Julia, correctly in my view, get British people, indigenous people, people who are already living here, working, because that is the only way we are going to really fix our fiscal problems, fix our precarious finances, that and growth. And for him to say this before we go into this long, hot summer of speculation about what Rachel Reeves is going to do in her budget in October, November, she's expecting the OBR to say, hey, guess what? We're going to upgrade all our immigration assumptions. That's going to give you a lot more growth, a lot more, pretend money to play with in the future. Maybe you can even cut taxes. The OBR aren't going to say that to her. They're just saying, no, time out, Chancellor. You actually have to do some difficult stuff here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really fascinating. But you say that the times are changing. We got the OBR saying this. So appreciate you joining us. As always, Liam Halligan is an economist, author of the Substack, When the Facts Change. Tom Slater, listening to all of that, it is significant that we talked about it a bit earlier, the different bodies, the different people who are now sort of waking up to all this.
No, absolutely. And the OBR is an interesting one because this government in particular has put so much faith in it after the Liz Truss debacle, where the slight, wrongly in my view, but the refusal to seek an OBR assessment for the mini budget.
And they really, that's a really big shtick for them, isn't it?
Absolutely, they're obsessed with it. Yeah. And so when Rachel Reeves comes in, she empowers the OBR. She says that it's going to be a real kind of check on government and what it does. For it to come out and basically shred 25 years of Labour Party orthodoxy where migration is concerned is amusing, but an indication of where the wind is blowing.
But can I say yet another problem though is that once again, it's the Climate Change Committee, whether it's human rights lawyers or whoever it is, and now the Office of Budget Responsibility, completely unaccountable, unappointed, unelected people having the final say on government policy. Much better. I don't mind having a sort of independent body that supposedly checks these things. I think I trust the Institute of Fiscal Studies more. But again, all of these think tanks, they tend to be from a certain class of people who are largely pro-status quo. They were kind of, I'm going to say, to a man and a woman, they voted Remain. A lot of them, probably voted Lib Dem at the last election. You know what I mean? You know where these people's politics are. I doubt very much you could be an open Reform Party supporter, for instance, working in any of these organisations. And you hand over that control, and then that kind of sets the parameters of debate and possible policy. You're much better off just giving. Show us all your workings out, and let opposition parties and the independent think tanks, let them criticise, and let the journalists see it as well, and let people like Liam Halligan, who knows is sodding economics, to give their assessment. I would much rather see that rather than we can't do anything because some unelected quango is saying we can't.
And unelected is the word. Alongside making sure we've got a broader public debate with as many people with different sets of expertise and views on these things as possible.
And different sets of interests.
Absolutely, but also it should involve the public. The public have been voting for lower immigration of one flavour or another for decades now, and they haven't been given
it. But that's it.
And that's what it should. The people should decide, and then the wonks and the experts should work out the best way to get to that outcome.
And then do what they're sodding told.
That's their job.
But it's like governments and policies always listen to their donors. They listen to big business. They listen to the CBI. Well, they're representing big business. Well, they're very happy to have mass immigration because it means they don't have to put their wages up. They're not necessarily representing the interests of taxpayers at that point, who are subsidising those wages with housing benefit and losing their own wage increase or losing their own jobs. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let's squeeze a quick call in before we go to a break. Bridget is on the line. She's in Suffolk. She's given us a call on 0344 499 1000. Good morning to you, Bridget.
Good morning, Julia. I just want to know what's the criteria the French are using to say that they're fit to come into this country. Who are their family? Are these said family members working, or are they on benefits? And when they do say, they're okay to come in, are they going to be on benefits and get free housing?
Well, they will be allowed to claim benefits because they'll be asylum seekers. But again, I'm assuming we're going to be doing the vetting and the checking, but they're already in France, but for some reason France doesn't want them or think they're eligible.
Well, I lived in France. I was with a French person for a few years. And when I was
I feel there's a story there, Bridget.
Yes, there is. And they used to laugh because they'd go, they don't want to be here. They don't want to be here. They want to go to Britain. And they used to think it was funny how they were letting all the migrants come over to us, and they thought it was very, very funny.
Oh, good. I'm glad we put a smile on the French people's face. Good for us, eh? Bridget, very good questions. Ones we should put to more politicians, should we not? Thank you so much for that call. Going to take a quick break. Up next, going to talk to Dr. Alan Mendoza of the Henry Jackson Society about Benjamin Netanyahu ordering a full occupation of Palestinian territory in Gaza. What does that actually mean? And why do former leaders of both Mossad and the IDF and a former Prime Minister disagree? That's up next. This is Talk.
It's a bit of a shock, isn't it? I mean, we're all expecting it, and yeah, it's a tough one, man.
How long did you work with him, Ash?
30 years, yeah.
So you probably knew him. You knew him in broadcast terms probably longer than most.
Well, yeah, definitely, yeah, and it was a great ride. I mean, I remember when I first got to work with him, they said we want you to do work with James Whale, and obviously, because when I was 18, I used to watch his show on the TV, and I thought, great, this would be exciting, and it turned out it was exciting.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Thank you very much indeed for still joining me. 11:51 is the time. Let's go straight to Dr. Alan Mendoza. He's Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society and joins us now to talk about the state of play of things in Israel and Gaza. A very good morning to you, Alan.
Hello, Julia.
Really interesting development in terms of a meeting Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, is holding after a statement he made yesterday ordering a full occupation of the Palestinian territories in Gaza. We've already seen a letter that's been sent by some very leading figures in Israel, including the former head of Mossad, former head of their internal security, former head of IDF, and indeed a former Prime Minister, urging Donald Trump to put pressure on the Israeli Prime Minister to back off from this plan, saying your military aims have been met. Hamas is no longer a threat to the borders of Israel, and this should not be the policy. Why does Benjamin Netanyahu want to push ahead with a full occupation of the territory?
Well, I suspect, Julian, I guess you'll have to ask him for the definitive account, but I suspect what he's trying to do here is resolve the conflict. Now, it's all very well to say that, Hamas has been defeated, but that's obviously not the case, because we know there are areas of Gaza where Hamas still has military force within it. We know they've still got the hostages, of course. The idea that you can just leave those and assume it's over is not really very realistic. I get why those people sent the letter. They're determined to end the conflict. Politically, they are not aligned with Netanyahu. And as a result, they want a different approach. Fine, but he's the Prime Minister. Ultimately, he's got to make the choice, and he's got to find a way to bring this conflict to a close. And one thing that all military people will tell you is an option, whether it's a good one or not, another matter, but one option is that you end it by an occupation, which then puts you in charge of the territory, of delivering aid, of removing the Hamas threat, but it also crucially then sets you up to decide what happens next. Now, he needs to have a plan for that as well, for this to actually work.
Well, we've had so many ideas of plans. OK, let's have a two-state solution. We've now got our own Prime Minister and other leading figures in G7 countries saying, they want to recognise a two-state solution. They want to recognise a Palestinian state, and we don't actually know what the borders would be or who would be in charge. But not Hamas. But again, who do they think would be in charge, and how would you have free and fair elections when Hamas are still in charge? But how much of this do you think is the reality of, look, we can't allow Hamas to ever, or any other organisation that has, basically a genocidal urge to destroy Israel and the Jewish people, to ever take control in Gaza and to protect our own people in Israel. This is what we have to do. And frankly, to hell with the rest of the world condemning us. No other nation state in the world would put up with having Hamas running the nation next to them. So why should we? How much of this is down to he's got to keep his coalition together? He can't end the war. He'll lose his two right-wing members that hold his coalition together. His government falls. He's quite an unpopular figure in lots of ways in Israel. His coalition government falls. He then has to face the corruption charges that have been sitting there waiting for him. We've got elections coming in as early as the autumn. How much is his own, is about protecting Israel, and how much of it is about protecting Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, be under no illusions, Julia, occupying Gaza would end the war. that would be the end of this conflict. It's something the Israelis had done before, of course, after 1967 until 2005. It was their removal of the occupation, as it were, that led to Hamas coming in and forming this statelet that then ended up attacking Israel. So you can kind of understand why they might want to do it. That said, it ended not very well in 2005. The Israelis left because they realized that was not a satisfactory conclusion. What it tells you is that you're in a very difficult situation. There are no easy answers. But to end this conflict, i.e. as we know it, one very definite way of doing so would be an occupation. There'd be an insurgency, I'm sure there'd be problems following it, but you would not have the same situation you're having now, and you'll finally have resolved, if you like, the Hamas remaining military strength in those areas. So I can see why he's doing it, and that would, of course, then force you into those other questions. So I don't think he's doing this to save his own premiership. This brings the war to a close, and if you're thinking he's trying to extend the war, this won't do it. Yeah, but there is, of course, this concern from the hostage families. You can completely understand that. Some 50 still held, it's believed some like 22 still alive. We saw those horrific videos at the weekend of two young men. I mean, just, 21, I think, and 24, emaciated, looking like, Belsen captives, quite deliberately, I think, by Hamas. Absolutely, one being forced to dig his own grave, one so weak, unable to move, being deliberately starved by their Hamas hostage takers in the tunnels. Just horrific images. And obviously the concern of the hostage families is that we want their hostages back. And this argument that we got them out before by negotiating, you're not going to get them out this way. We know that Hamas will just shoot them dead rather than, we've seen them, they've executed 6 before when they thought that IDF soldiers were getting close, that they're more likely to get them back alive. But the reality is, of course, when there was negotiation to get hostages back in return for paying the huge ransom of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, even thousands in the end, of Palestinian, some prisoners, some murderers, terrorists, rapists and others get back into the Gaza territory, that was done from a position of strength by Israel, wasn't it? It was Hamas had its back against the wall, and that's why they agreed to negotiate. And of course, they clearly don't feel their backs against the wall at the moment. They've got the prospect of a Palestinian state being recognised by Britain, Canada and France. So they clearly think that they are, they might be defeated on the ground, but they believe they're going to get their war aims. They've been thanking the likes of Keir Starmer for the fruits of October the 7th. So why would they negotiate and hand back hostages now? Well, this is an extraordinary spectacle. You have a prescribed terrorist group in this country, Hamas, who is trolling the British Prime Minister by openly saying, you are the reason that we're going to keep fighting this war. Yep. We're going to wait until you grant us statehood, as you said you would now, and then we might consider, giving up at that point. But we all know that's not going to happen. We all know that we've got ourselves into an absolute disastrous foreign policy position by going down this path of demanding concessions from Israel, but not from the terrorists in this way. So you're right. Hamas are in a very strong position right now. They feel the international community, some of the countries in the West, are backing them. I think everyone, frankly, Julia, is waiting to hear what Donald Trump has to say on this matter. Yeah. And I think Netanyahu has set out his stall to say, right, the Europeans want Hamas to win. Fine. That's their position. My position is Israel's going to win. Where do you stand? And I think this will not get resolved now until Donald Trump decides on which side of the debate he wishes to go on. But again, he's been pretty solid on Israel, but I do worry not 100% solid, because he's sort of, being swayed by the propaganda pictures of the children in Gaza. And I guess we absolutely want aid to go into civilians and for no child to ever be hungry. Of course we do. But we're expecting from Israel stuff that we simply don't expect from any other national government when they're fighting a war. By the way, nobody starved in Gaza when the Israelis occupied Gaza from 1967 to 2005. Nobody. So, well, it is funny, isn't it? So it tells you that this occupation strategy is one way of resolving the humanitarian aid problem. The Israelis take over that situation completely. They feed the population, they disarm and remove the militants and terrorists, and they get on with it that way. So it's viable. I don't think it's a great option, but it's a viable one from that perspective. What about the perspective of families in Israel? We've seen this conscripted army. I mean, they soon after October the 7th, they called up, hundreds of thousands of reservists. We're talking about young men and women who've been trained up in the IDF, who've been forced to fight. This is really dangerous combat in booby-trapped bomb, houses with, rigged with bombs in many parts of Gaza. Really coming back, injured, and some never coming back alive at all. How do Israeli families feel about their young people being in an army that could be bogged down in Gaza for years? Well, that's obviously part of the equation here, isn't it? The discussion about the domestic Israeli political scene and how that kind of plays out with a conscript army where ordinary people are brought into the army and go forward and face those situations. That said, that's what Israel's faced since the time of its inception. It knows it's assailed by potential aggressors on all sides. It's known it's had to pay a high price in blood in terms of defending that country. And I think Israelis ultimately, if they feel that this is the best option, they will bear the burden, as they have borne the burden since 1947-48.
Dr. Hannah Mendoza, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. I'm going to get Tom Slater's thoughts on that in just a couple of moments. Also going to be talking to Baroness Claire Fox. I'm also going to be getting tribute from Lizzie Cundy, close friend of James Whale, to the legendary broadcaster who lost his life yesterday. Lots more of your calls as well. Do keep in touch with us. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you as always for tuning in. Very much appreciate your company. Tom Slater's editor of Spiked Online. He's also still with me for the show. Don't forget, of course, you can go to my YouTube page at any time if you've missed any of the show. It's called, bet you can't guess, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. There you go. No excuses. Can't find it. It's YouTube, and you can hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Now, of course, we are, still paying tribute to the wonderful, the late, the great, the legend of broadcasting, the father of the phone-in, James Whale, our wonderful dear colleague who sadly lost his life yesterday after a 20-year battle with cancer at the age of 74. Now, he was not only a friend and a colleague, but he brought the shock jock genre to Britain and was an absolute trailblazer. We're going to be talking to one of his closest friends, Lizzie Cundy, a little bit later in this hour. We know he'll be deeply missed, not just by everyone here at Talk here, but I know by you as well. He's been on air since the autumn of 2016, just a few months after we started the show, the station. So we really appreciate all the lovely messages that we've had from you, and there are so many people here who will miss him, including obviously miss him dearly. Also going to be talking in this hour about this one-in, one-out pilot scheme between Britain and France involving migrants. Going to talk to our guest Claire Fox, the independent peer, about that and a few other stories as well. And we're also going to be talking about the Tory Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Donna Jones. She says that she was pressured by a government minister to retract a statement she made suggesting that mass uncontrolled immigration was one of the reasons behind rioting last summer. I mean, do they really think it isn't? Plus, Keir Starmer has put pressure on police chiefs to release more information about offenders as unrest grows over the government's handling of the migration crisis. Government sources suggest it would help rebuild public trust. Oh, yeah. Do you think? Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, particularly on the migrant issue, but anything you want to get in touch with, you know you're always welcome to get on the phone lines. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, particularly about Britain's one-in, one-out pilot scheme to return boat migrants to France. It's beginning this week, comes into action today. Not quite sure when the first are actually going to be detained, how quickly they're going to be deported. Another question, how quickly the other lot from France are going to arrive here. But what is your reaction to that scheme? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. And of course, calls are charged at the national rate and text cost one standard network rate message. I'm going to come to that in a minute, but we just, in the last few moments, did speak to Alan Mendoza of the Henry Jack Society about what's going on in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu looking at sort of a full occupation of Gaza, as was the case before 2005. A lot of anger about that, even within Israel. Tom Slater, as I say, joins us. I wanted to give you longer time to give us your thoughts on that. The reality is, I mean, you know, Israel pulled out. People talk about this occupied, Gaza being occupied. Since 2005, Gaza has been left to its own devices. And the only reason there were, you know, these limits on, you know, land, sea and other entry to and exits to Gaza was because of the threat posed by Hamas, who were elected very soon after. No elections in the best part of 20 years since. They made their raison d'etre the destruction of Israel and the killing of Jews. So understandably, Israel wanted to make sure that they weren't able to do that, and sadly until October the 7th in 2023. Do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu is right to plan for the full occupation of Gaza?
Well, it's also unclear as to whether or not this is something which is a plan which is actually imminently about to be implemented, or whether it's part of a kind of war of words between the two sides. What are America going to say about this? There's all these kind of moving parts, and wherever Israel-Palestine is concerned, it's always worth waiting a bit to see how things actually pan out. This is obviously, there are no easy options in relation to this conflict. Benjamin Netanyahu has made clear that one of the war aims here is the destruction of Hamas's victory over this jihadist terrorist group, which has been menacing Israelis long before October the 7th, but obviously that being the grim, horrific crowning achievement of that long campaign to destroy that nation. But at the same time, another one of his war aims is to recover the hostages, and it's accepted policy of the Hamas jihadists that as soon as you get anywhere close, the IDF gets anywhere close to them, they will execute those hostages. We've seen it with some of the American-Israeli hostages.
But they want to keep hostages, the few they have still, 22 they believe to be alive, but also Israel wants the bodies of others back to be sure, to know that people are not still suffering. That sort of no man left behind policy. But there's that concern that if they go into those areas, that they will lose those hostages. But Hamas only came to the negotiation table a couple of times to release hostages because their backs were against the wall. They clearly aren't against the wall at the moment because they've walked away from the latest ceasefire talks.
No, and unfortunately, a lot of idiotic Western powers have given them a boost recently. This talk of recognising Palestine, which has been taken as a reward for October the 7th, very clearly from Hamas leadership.
And Hamas has said that.
Saying that. So we've worked out who this plan is finally pleased. Obviously, Hamas leadership has been decimated, I mean, in terms of the people who've been taken out, but it hasn't completely gone away. There are still pockets of control, and that's something which obviously the Israeli government is going to want to deal with. The problem is also there's a domestic situation. The kind of international one we're more accustomed to. You know, anything which looks like indefinite occupation, let alone annexation, is something which is going to sour or an already sour relationship with Israel, unfairly or fairly so. But domestically is also a problem. You've got the hostage families who are dead against anything like this because they're primarily concerned with getting around the table and getting the hostages.
As you would be.
As you would be. It's totally understandable.
But this is negotiating with terrorists, and
also,
it's paying a ransom to terrorists, which by the way, no Western government claims they do.
No, exactly, which is morally fraught in its own way. So even though you can understand where they're coming from, that's...
Well, there's a reason why Hamas took hostages, because they knew for every hostage they took, they would get hundreds of thousands more prisoners back.
Absolutely. But then there's also the kind of murmurings that are happening within the IDF itself, increasingly willing to kind of speak to the New York Times, Western newspapers, criticising the way in which the Prime Minister has been handling this. And in the Times today, this story that 600 retired Israeli security officials are basically writing a letter to Donald Trump to say he needs to help bring the war to an end. So there's so many moving pieces here. There's so much that we still don't know, and there's a really fraught domestic situation within Israel before we even get into the international picture. So a lot that's left to be seen.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you very much, Steve, for that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Obviously, and all the migrant stories as well. Tom Slater, thank you. Let's welcome Baroness Claire Fox to the show now, independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas. Very good afternoon to you.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Now, I wanted you to talk about migrants. Did you want to have your say on just where we are on Israel and Gaza? Because I know you often talk about these issues as well.
Well, I think that there's a lot of internal rows going on in Israel. That's a sign, by the way, of a healthy democracy. So, fair enough. I am absolutely tearing my hair out, though, about this recognition of Palestine, just simply because it seems so performative to me. It's entirely it won't have one iota of difference on any Palestinian child or anyone hungry or anything else. So why are they doing it? And it seems entirely self-serving for the UK. And
for the UK Prime Minister.
As you've just discussed very fully, it is absolutely giving in to the demands of Hamas. And there is no such thing as recognising this state. There is no state of Palestine in a straightforward way. And self-determination of the Palestinian people should be determined by the Palestinian people, not international recognition for their own domestic audiences.
Yeah, very, very good point. You used the word performative there, and I suppose that's the best description as well of this new one-in, one-out migrant policy as well that was announced during the French summit with Emmanuel Macron a few weeks ago. Apparently, as of today, it comes into legal force, and then we're going to see it by the end of this week. So we've got 800 migrants who come over on boats roughly most weeks on average. We've got a 50% rise this year on what we had arriving by this time last year. So things aren't going so well on the smashing the gangs front. So you've got on average 800 migrants arriving on those boats once a week. 50 of those are going to be detained, we're told, as part of this pilot scheme. I don't know which 50 they choose. And so 50 are detained, and then they're going to be deported back to France. Now, we don't know how long that will take. The human rights lawyers are going to be all over this, as we know. And in return for those 50, we're going to get another 50 people from France who are already asylum seekers, who apparently have been vetted, who have some link to this country. They've got a second cousin in Leicester, and they're going to be able to come to this country and no doubt then bring all of their extended family too, as often being the case. Seems to me we're going to end up with more people, and I'm not quite sure how we've got a deterrent here. What do you make of the scheme?
Again, listen, one thing I will say, and I don't often say this, I sort of feel sorry for the Labour government, because I think what's happening is, I think that somebody said, oh, God, we've got to do something about all those people protesting, and we've got to be seen to be doing something. So they pulled open a drawer of kind of daft policies from the past that everyone's rejected and said, why don't we try this one or this one or this one? And actually, they've announced quite a lot of policies this week. There's the visas and students. So every time you kind of turn the telly on or listen to the radio, there's a new anti-small boats, tackle the gangs policy. And each one of them is dafter than the last one. And none of us can take them seriously. So it's not just performative, but it's actually discrediting.
Yeah. Oh, we just roll our eyes. Yeah, we were discussing the extra £100 million for border security yesterday. That's at this end as opposed to the French. I mean, do I need to read the details? It's just going to be a load of nonsense, not going to make a difference. If any of this stuff worked, we wouldn't have seen a 50% increase in the last year.
Exactly. But you also made a very good point about your second cousin jibe. Actually, one of the things that's a real problem in relation to what then passes as a legitimate asylum seeker is it seems to me that, first of all, it's very unclear when they say they're going to, for example, get rid of the backlog and they're going to zoom through it quicker, whether that means they're tick boxing people through. We know that the definitions of asylum seeker and refugee are outdated and don't fit the present model anyway, don't fit the present world. So you just can think, well, you can have got rid of the waiting list can go down because you've just said yes to everyone. We also have this ridiculous family reunification policy. Now, we all know that when it was designed originally, you can imagine a situation where if you were Jewish and fleeing Nazi persecution or fleeing from the Stalinist regimes, that, you might turn up and think, well, could I bring my wife or children and so on. Now we know that this is one of the most abused parts of the present asylum system. And as a consequence, what we're now saying is that all these people in France who say, I've got a second cousin, so wherever, right, can come over. And I always make the point, if this is kind of all about honouring the family, why it is that all those young men who arrive are so committed to their family that they've left their wives, sisters, mothers and kids behind. I mean, you do think hardly an act of courage and bravery. Can't you put the women in the boats first? But they don't manage to do that. Yet somehow whenever it's discussed in the Lords, it drives me mad. People start saying, what about the families? What about the children? This is so cruel. We've got to have family reunification. Well, we know that as a consequence of which, there will be a large number of extended families who will then be seen as not a problem because they've got legitimate asylum
Not
status.
a problem, and they're not in asylum hotels, so there won't be people protesting, but they'll be moved into this country. And what a surprise, they're asylum seekers. You haven't got that strong a family link here. Oh, and now they go to the top, of course, of the council housing list. And again, more and more families, British families of every ethnicity, who are sitting on this list, who are desperately trying to compete for, low rent housing and homes, they get pushed down the list once again. Those asylum children, by the way, also get priority at local schools.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that some neighbours of mine who are, from long-standing migrant families are forever complaining, saying, we can't get a council house because of all these foreigners turning up and jumping up the list, right? So those people who sort of see this as just through the prism of skin colour and ethnicity are slightly missing the point. There's lots of people who are long-standing people in this country who are perfectly reasonably in queues. I mean, when I say reasonably, we should be building more houses. That's a different question. But they're perfectly reasonably saying, OK, we're waiting our turn, we're going up the housing list. And then suddenly they go down 20 places, right? Why? Because emergency accommodation has been given out. And the rented sector is likely to take an absolute pounding. When, as we know, these houses of multiple occupation are going to be brought into play.
Yeah, and it's all
the hotels.
Yeah, exactly. And they think that we won't notice. And the key thing there is, of course, that hotel bill is really, really obvious, isn't it? And not so obvious when you're paying these long-term contracts, the like of Serco, who are then renting accommodation, but paying, the deposit, refurbishment, new cookers, everything on a 5-year lease. I mean, loads of families would love to get a 5-year lease. They can't get more than 6 months to a year. They'd love a 5-year lease, but they're also paying massively over the odds using our money. So people are struggling to pay higher rents because the competition goes up for fewer properties still available out of their taxed income, and those taxes are going to pay the extra super duper rent for these asylum seekers. And the thing is, it's on such a big scale now. People are noticing. What do you make of these demonstrations and these protests? Some have turned ugly, largely it seems actually, because of the arrival of the so-called anti-fascist, anti-racist mob with their balaclavas, bust in with their professional socialist worker placards. But ordinary men, women and children in local areas, whether it's in Barbican or Canary Wharf in London, whether it's the Bell and Epping, whether it's in Bournemouth or Norwich or anywhere else in the country, just saying, no, we don't want these people here. And particularly a lot of these protests have started after a rise in crime in local areas, but also very serious accusations levelled at some men who've been arrived in these boats, accused of, some charges even being brought of raping a 12-year-old girl. Now, people are innocent until proven guilty, but people have a right to express concern, don't they?
Absolutely. There was an interesting article, I think, in the Critic magazine the other day by one of the journalists who's been covering these demonstrations, and he made the point that for many people, we think of the Southport riots as the kind of starting point of this, but he made the point there was a very different atmosphere. There was a lot of people who were breaking the law in relation to the Southport riots, whereas these people who are protesting today want a change in law. In many ways, the mood is one of, I mean, it's not quite just all the ladies dressed in pink that we saw
but
at
it was
the
a
weekend.
nice touch. It was sending a message, wasn't it? Non-threatening, just,
hokey-cokey, singing We'll Meet Again, all this sort of stuff. I mean, it was actually rather well done. But, I mean, it's not all been like that. But I think there is a genuine feeling that people cannot wait for Parliament to act, and they're right to think that. They want to express how they feel, and they're going about it in the way that in a democracy you do, which is you have demonstrations, you make your feelings heard, and that's what they've done.
Yeah.
And I think that the marginal trouble that we've seen on some of these demonstrations, I do think has not been helped by some of the rather peculiar policing decisions that have been made, and the fact that Antifa turn up in intimidating garb, with an obvious, they might say, oh, we're the anti-racists here. I think Tom's magazine, Smite, did a really good article on how there were people from all different immigrant backgrounds who are legal migrants who are going on the demos.
Yeah, who, funnily enough, all cared about their daughters. I mean, and it is a key issue.
Exactly.
Do you think
that's why the racism thing is so bad, just to say, because I just think saying that we're the anti-racists and we're opposed to you implies that everyone on the demos are racist, and they aren't.
Yeah, and people have actually got, there's one banner I saw, people saying, we're not far right, but we're not far wrong, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. Do you feel that we are hitting a tipping point? A lot of people, Nigel Farage got in trouble for saying he thought we were, and lots of people, a lot of our callers, a lot of my colleagues who talk just feel there's just a slight sort of change in the air and a feeling that people are going, seriously, okay, we gave the Labour lot a year. We didn't trust them in the first place on this. They're not going to deal with this. They're trying to have one over on us. They think we're idiots. They've contempt for us. They think we're just racist bigots for raising concerns about this. They're talking about giving a bit more information now, Keir Starmer and Vivek Cooper, after Nigel Farage pressed them, about giving more information about, immigration status, ethnicity and the like. But fundamentally, we've got, a government, a civil service, a police and councils and everyone else who don't think this is a problem when the rest of us do.
I think there's so many aspects of why people are tearing their hair out. And partly it is that they feel that they're being gaslit by the government, who don't, who kind of look you in the eye and don't take seriously what you're saying, don't understand.
Nothing to see here.
I've got no instinctive feeling for why it is that people are going, I can't stand this, I can't stand the fare dodging. I can't.
Oh, don't.
No, but we can't go with the fact that the police are going to be more likely to policing your tweets than policing when you have a theft or something serious happen. All of these things. So there's one thing after another, and each and every time people do not feel that their concerns are being taken seriously. In fact, the opposite. One of the things that is most distressing at the moment is the way the government have identified that the problem people are like the protesters or those who complain. So the online safety bill, now an act, ends up taking down perfectly legitimate but difficult political conversations. We find out about a secret spying unit coming out of Whitehall that instead of identifying would-be jihadists and terrorists are now turning their eye to people who are on protests outside asylum hotels, etc., etc. So each and every time, the people they seem most scared about, and even this discussion about what information you can have and what you can't have, the police withholding information, all of this is about saying that the biggest problem facing this country is this sort of unruly mob of types of plebs who are feeling disgruntled. Your very point about that atmosphere, a rather febrile atmosphere, I mean, it does feel as though people have had enough, that is seen as the problem, and how you can manage and control that, including shaping narratives in a way that's actually openly deploying official misinformation, not misinformation from protesters, but the government planning how they let information be known to us.
Telling a police chief off for linking the riots last summer to migration.
That was extraordinary, wasn't it? Because one of the things about those riots was that what in fact that woman was saying, the police and crime commissioner was saying, can we look at more deeply what created these riots? And she said maybe the basis of it is disgruntlement about mass migration. The fact you can't say that, you got a phone call
from a Home
Office
Minister
telling you not to to take it down is extraordinary.
Absolutely. But by the way, remember, of course, the politicians never interfere in policing. Of course, they never do. I'm going to have to leave it there. But Baroness Claire Fox, as always, is why we have you on all the time, talking loads and loads of sense. There's a lot more of it about. I just wish you weren't an independent peer. I wish you were in government, independent peer, director of Academy Ideas, Claire Fox there. Tom Slater, I mean, she just, Baroness Claire Fox just mentioned that, Spike had written about this, but you personally attended that, the Canary Wharf, the pink, the mums and daughters in their pink protest. And what did you make of what happened there?
No, I thought it was really fascinating. So we were actually reporting the weekend before, which was before the kind of mums and daughters protest took place, where it was just the first kind of organised demonstration that they had down there. And I think when people found out about this migrant hotel in Canary Wharf, there was a little bit of misunderstanding. People kind of think of Canary Wharf as the sort of, height of kind of anywheres, people who are just there to work in high finance or whatever. Where that hotel is on the cusp when Canary Wharf turns into the Isle of Dogs, where you turn the corner and you're around kind of low-rise council estates and even the old terraces which survived the regeneration. And so what you had there was
ordinary working class communities.
Absolutely, multiracial working class communities. I was talking to a mother of 5. All of her kids are half Moroccan. She's as infuriated about this migrant hotel as anyone else. And also, as Claire referenced, there were a lot of people there, more from the Canary Wharf side, shall we say, from the living in the new skyscrapers or whatever, who are quite well-to-do legal migrants who are as sharing in their concerns about all of this. I spoke to a recent arrival from mainland China who said that they felt the pain of the community. They wanted to come out and show that this wasn't far right, and that in the same way that when they're coming back from their software job, they want to feel safe walking back. They want that same thing for the Isle of Dogs community that they now live amongst. So this is not the kind of caricature which has been presented with, I think, was the one thing.
And it's really good that people like you were out there. That's where your office is. I know. It's somewhere I did my first year in my local paper covering that area. I know that area really well. It's changed massively in God knows how many years since then. But it's again, there is a caricature of what's going on, and it's really important to have reporters like you on the ground for giving that accurate information. I just want to bring you some breaking news this morning. You just got to laugh. You just got to see the funny side on this. Really, we're just talking about these illegal migrants being deported and then getting replacement. Just going to laugh. Rwanda is going to take 250 illegal migrants deported from the United States. The Rwandan authorities are reviewing an initial list of candidates provided from President Trump's mass removal programme, and they're going to accommodate those in accommodation which, very usefully already exists, because Britain spent an estimated £700 million providing it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one. Can you keep it clean enough for me to put it on air? Just sputter. Just beep yourself out. Going to get to your calls up next. 0344 499 1000. Couldn't make the stuff up. This is Talk.
fascinating. I mean, he had a really wide circle of friends as well, you know, from the shows that he did on TV, where there was quite a lot of, you know, very well-known people. And you heard Ash saying he interviewed Spike Milligan. You know, he had an incredible way about him. I remember when we did a tribute to him, you know, a lifetime of nighttime.
I remember that, yeah.
Which
I remember watching it.
Assuming we'll be showing again. We recorded it a couple of years ago, and some of the things that I hadn't seen until we did that show, you know, like the incredible scenes of him. He had some woman on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. In a few moments' time, we're going to talk to Lizzie Cundy, a long-time friend of James Well, paying tribute to her good friend and, of course, our colleague here at Talk. First up, let's get to your phone calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have your say on, of course, this one-in, one-out migrant plan. It's going to start as of today. Is it going to actually do anything to cut the boat numbers? Give me a break. Simon's in Derby. What do you want to say, Simon?
Thank you, Julie, for having me.
Thank you for calling.
And condolences to Talk Radio and all your colleagues on your
that's very kind.
sad loss.
Thank you.
It's a great shame. Horrible when people come into your... Well, it's nice when people come into your lives, but it's horrible when they leave.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put.
There we are. It was just to follow up on you. I was speaking to your researcher, and I just don't quite get the problem of this migrant business when... Yeah. Our borders aren't brilliant, okay, but France's are even worse. They're porous. Yeah. So the problem, their border problem is creating a problem for us. Yeah. So instead of us giving them £500 million, they should be paying us to send these people back.
They've created the problem in the first place. Well, also, a lot of the people go to France where they know they've got a very slim chance of getting asylum and they're not going to be welcome, not going to get a four-star hotel, because they're going to come to the Calais beaches and come here. If they knew they were going to be returned, they probably wouldn't bother going to France in the first place.
Yeah, that's point, yes. And point two, which I think is even more succinct, is why is it that there's no... The maritime law says that or whatever it says about saving lives at sea. Why is there not a problem within the 12-mile radius of their border, but there is outside of their 12-mile border?
Yeah, you're right. They don't. I think a lot of the boats, they figured, they're ramshackle, but they can make it that first few miles, and then it becomes our problem. We know we've got footage of the French escorting the boats to the international waters.
We should say we'll save them for you if you're not prepared to do it yourself, or you've missed a couple, chaps, Claude. Yeah. But we'll send you the bill for it because, you know, you're obviously not doing your job properly at saving lives at sea, and you know there's a problem there. Yeah. So why don't you just put loads of boats out there and save all those people and save us all a bloody problem?
Exactly. And again, even just basic drone technology, the idea, we can't catch all the boats. Really? Really, you can't have drones that wouldn't spot those boats? I mean, they're the size of houses, those boats, for goodness sake. Simon, thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. Oh, you'll never guess who's on the line next. Strap in, everybody. Georgina's on the line in London. And Georgina, before I let you start, I just want to say the hugest thank you for your gorgeous gift. I got beautiful flowers and gifts from you yesterday. The loveliest card. As always, more compliments from you than I get from a husband in 20 years of marriage. So thank you very much.
Well, you're a shining light in a very weary world, Julia, and it's getting wearier by the moment. I just wanted to say my condolences to James Wells' family and everyone at Talk. And I also wanted, I've got a bit of a chest infection at the moment. Oh, no. I also wanted to talk about the breaking point of Britain. Now, I've got a few points I want to say. I'm going to rattle on, switch me off when you run out of time.
When Lizzie Cundy is sort of shouting and saying, I want to come on, I'll cut you off. Right, okay.
All right, darling. I've been listening to the calls, and all I can hear is discontent, despair, and anger. and it's palpable, Julia, and the common denominator is illegal migration. Everyone wants to know, why is this illegal migration happening on this epic scale? You know, we know they're not families fleeing war-torn countries. We know they're fighting-age sexually active males being infiltrated into our society. It's not racism to ask this question. It's a reality, and it's because we as a nation are concerned. Our society is broken, our police and healthcare are overwhelmed, our courts are backlogged, our women and children are being attacked, and crime is skyrocketing. To protect your nation and your culture and your family, this is not hate crimes. This is a genuine safeguarding and concern of our country and people. The people breaking into the borders of Britain have no desire to integrate into our cultural or society, and the population are not crazy for noticing this. This means they are finally seeing things for what they really are. You know, we've got small towns being swamped with migrants. We have migrants laughing at us and videoing us. Peaceful protesters, Julia, whilst they hang out at the very hotel windows that we are paying to put them in. And the people who are trying to solve and stop the illegal migration are being silenced by the people who don't care about Britain and its population. The truth is, the system that want division and destabilisation, they want population that is afraid to question authority and a population that is easy to manipulate. This government have policies that punish the working and middle classes while protecting the elite narrative, and we are not supposed to say anything.
But we are speaking up, and you speak up brilliantly. Georgina, I cannot stress enough how much I want you to stand for election so badly. You are an absolutely fabulous voice of reason. I so appreciate your call. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate your flowers. It was so kind of you. Very, very. Yeah, you get to speak longer if you send me flowers. Very, very simple exchange system we've got here. Georgina, always is wonderful. Thank you for calling. We're going to take a very quick break. Then we are going to be talking to a long time, very close friend of James Bell, and obviously big regular on the late night show on Talk with James Bell. That is, of course, Lizzie Cundy. She's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is the talk of. This is the talk. This is talk. The home of common sense. I can't believe I don't even know where I work anymore. But let's talk right now about our good friend, our good colleague, and of course, sadly, our late friend now, James Whale, who lost his life yesterday at the age of 74 after a lengthy battle against cancer. He fought valiantly to the last, but sadly, yesterday was his last day, and he is mourned now by his wife Nadine, of course his 2 children, and of course his many friends and many colleagues, many of whom he worked with closely at many different radio stations here at Talk since 2016, and many friends who were regulars appearing on his late night show here on Talk, and among those is his very close friend, long-standing friend, Lizzie Cundy, who joins us right now to pay tribute to the great James Whale. Very good afternoon to you, Lizzie.
Hi, hello Julia, and thank you firstly for your gorgeous message. I really do appreciate that.
Well, I know how close you are to it. I don't think I've ever seen James in the last few years without you being there. You're one of his fun friends, but you're also one of the people he'll go drinking with and have a laugh with, but also one of the people who's been there at his side and at his wife Nadine's side when he's been going through the recurrence of the cancer. Tell us your sort of strongest memory of James. How are you going to remember him?
Oh, my word. Well, probably telling me off, actually.
Yeah, there you go, exactly.
He was very good at that. No, he was a great support to me. He'd watch everything I was on. He'd then ring me afterwards and tell me what I should have said and how I should have done it better and what the hell was I wearing. And I love that in James. And I lost my father quite young, and he became that father figure to me. And he often said to me, I was like the daughter he never had. So we had a very close bond. I met him nearly 30 years ago when he was first, diagnosed with kidney cancer, and he was wanting me to help him with the charity. And we just had a great chemistry. We got on ever so well. He did remind me of my late father, just because he was brutally honest, fearless, but also had a real soft side, which he really did. He was very, very caring and very loving, and he's the first person to ring me if he knew something wasn't right and say, right, how can I help?
And that's a side a lot of people might not have known when they've seen or heard him over the years. He was one of the first people to put radio on the telly, and he's telling people, get off the air, throwing people out of studios and all of that. And that wasn't an act. He was like that in real life, but there was also this much softer, much kinder side that was there. And there's also, of course, this amazing charity what you did, and as you said, that's how you met him. Talk us through what he did, because of course his MBE, which he was so proud of getting, and he did it in style, didn't he? Had Charlie Mullins, was it his roller, to take him to the palace, and we had that massive party in the evening, and it was amazing. But he was so proud. But that was not just for broadcasting; it was for his charity. Tell us what the lengths he went to raise money for other people.
Well, he was fantastic, because he'd ring round everyone, get all his showbiz friends to help. He'd do these great curry evenings. He was a real lover of curry, and he said curry brings people together. And he'd have these great evenings where we'd raise loads of money, but he knew such a selection of people, from Nigel Farage to Bobby Davro, all sorts, that he'd all get on board, and everyone would show up for James. They were too scared not to, but it was amazing. And we'd always have a big night at the British Curry Awards, and I just remember one night he got on stage and he said, look, I don't know if I'm going to be here at the last one. I won't be. The cancer is really taking over, but I love curry. And then that year he went, Lizzie, get a table for the British Curry Awards. I said, James, I can't. You've already told them that you'll be dead. And he laughed and laughed. And we had this really great sense of humour. And yes, though he did throw people out the studio, cut people off, tell them what for, and if he didn't like you, he certainly knew about it. But he really did have this wonderful, wonderful soft side, and he was so caring and loving. And if he knew someone was not great, he'd say, Lizzie, bring them in, or let me help them, and he'd give his time.
And I just think lots of people just simply wouldn't know about that. But it was really lovely listening to the station yesterday, and our colleagues, Russell Quirk, having to announce on air, and he did message me after. He was so, I said, you do that really well. And he was saying, you felt so emotional. And I went, well, yeah, but you should be emotional when a colleague does. But he, like Peter Cobble and lots of other the younger presenters, saying how much he'd given them. Again, it's same in the sort of, like, you did that wrong, but here's what you should have done. But he would give support and give help. And a lot of the younger producers, in their 20s, and talking about him. But he was straight. He was an honest talker. I wrote down yesterday, I was trying to think, like, how would I describe him? And I said, like, funny, clever, sharp as a nail, controversial, outspoken, rambunctious, irrepressible, noisy, rowdy, unruly, maddening. And I went, and a pain in the backside. And I was thinking also, the world is a lot quieter now. It just feels quieter already.
It's going to be a quieter place without him, that's for sure. I mean, when I used to see him call me, usually late at night or after the show, we'd be on the phone for about an hour. But he would, he was so full of life until the end. He wanted to continue to work. Yeah. It was his focus, and it kept him going. And I think it really did give him so many more years having the show at talkTV, where we had so many laughs on Saturday night.
Oh, you did.
He loved it. He loved every moment of it. And he'd phone me after and say, how good was I doing this? And I'd go, yeah, you were great. And, and he had this huge love for his wife, Nadine.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's the thing, people, he lost his wife, his mother of his two boys. He lost her to cancer, then he battled cancer himself, and it's wonderful that he did find love again. And Nadine saying, look, I'm not walking away because you're dying of cancer, I'm still here.
Yeah, and he said, look, what's happening, Nadine's got to look after me. And he said, she's so amazing. And his last words to me on Friday when I saw him at the hospice is, Lizzie, please look after Lady W. She's my world. And I that breaks my heart. But as you said, Julia, so many people have rung me saying how they've, James helped their careers. And Simon Cowell actually said to me that he became Mr. Nasty because of James Whale, watching those late night shows, copying the way James was with people. And he said it was just genius. And James would love that.
Yeah, and also a lot of people, especially young people, don't realise, he really was, the father of phone-ins, bringing them to this country, and the shock jock title, which of course he loved. This hadn't been done before. He was a revolutionary. He genuinely is a broadcasting great. And although he wasn't sort of, sitting on, Radio 2 his entire career like a lot of people from that generation, as Mike Graham was saying, and he got fired a lot, but he picked himself up and he took his audience with him everywhere he went.
He did indeed. I mean, I remember one of the times he did get fired, he rang me and he went, right, I've just been fired, let's have a drink, celebrate, and let's think what we're going to do next. He wasn't someone that was going to sit in the corner and cry.
My final thought, I was thinking, I'm not a believer in God, but I could just imagine he arrived at those pearly gates yesterday, didn't half give the Archangel Gabriel an earful, telling him what he was doing wrong. I mean, you could just imagine it.
Well, he told me he's going to come and haunt me unless I put some clothes on. So I said, okay. But I really am going to miss him, Julia. And as I said, he's been like a father figure to me. So it's going to be tough. But I'm so grateful to have had him in my life.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing those wonderful, wonderful memories. And I'm so glad you had such a wonderful friendship with him. You were a wonderful friend to him. I know that. He certainly spoke about that to me. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for those wonderful, wonderful tributes. Tom Slater's still with me. Look, I mean, God, I hope people say things like that about us when we're gone.
No, exactly. Even a fraction of the warm words that you're seeing.
I love the idea that you can't go to the curry wards. You've already told them you're dead.
So many great anecdotes like that, and also just kind of taking life seriously, but also wanting to have a good time with it, even whilst struggling with cancer for many years. I mean, this is the way.
You're only here once.
Absolutely.
Live your best life.
Live life to the full, and left such a mark, not just on broadcasting as we've heard about, but on individuals who are singing his praises.
Absolutely
today.
Lovely. Honestly, I can't tell you, it's just wonderful hearing all those amazing tributes. 12:47 is the time. We're going to take a break. We're going to be talking about prisons up next. Don't tune out. This is Talk.
seems to me that there are these thugs that turn up just when the politics are getting really, really awkward for the government. I mean, any government that isn't terrified of women and children turning out en masse to protest against something as sensitive as immigration policy is a government with its head in the sand, and I'm afraid actually that is probably what we've got.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:50 is the time. Let's talk prisons right now. Quite a few stories regarding prisons and indeed criminals in the news. Let's talk about it all with David Shipley. He's a writer and researcher on prison and justice issues, but also a former prisoner himself. A very good afternoon to you, David.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Well, let's talk first of all about, I suppose, people before they even go to prison, and the Prime Minister urging police to give out more information about criminals and indeed suspected offenders at an earlier stage. He says that's necessary to rebuild trust. Now, this has all come out about ever since Axel Rudikabana and the information that was put out about him, with the lack of information perhaps sparking the Southport riots last year. And then, of course, we had the situation in Liverpool where a man is alleged to have rammed his car into people during a football victory parade. And then police very quickly saying that the man that they had arrested was a white man born in the local area. We often get no information, and sometimes we get suddenly, lots of detailed information, but it does seem to depend on, often, the ethnicity of the offender. So, for instance, when we had a 12-year-old girl who was allegedly raped in Nuneaton, we didn't have any information, and so it emerged that actually the two men who were arrested and charged are both people who've arrived on the migrant boat. So is there a bit of two-tier justice going on there?
I think there is. And I think what's really disturbing about this is that we know from the recent Casey report that one of the big drivers behind covering up the grooming gangs, the rape gangs, was this fear of inflaming community tensions. And we also know that asylum seekers and migrants from some countries, in particular places like Eritrea and Afghanistan, are particularly likely to be involved in sexual abuse, sexual assaults and rapes when they arrive here. So you would have thought that after the Casey review, with the investigations coming into the rape gangs and with things like Southport, the state would have learned. But you're absolutely right with the horrible attack in Warwickshire, where two people have been charged. They seem to have decided again to cover it up. We've heard that the police were briefing local councillors and telling them they had to keep it quiet. Apparently, the council leader was told that he could face, contempt of court charges if he described the identities of the men who'd been charged, which is nonsense.
Yeah. Again, I did do the legal training to become a journalist. There are things you're allowed to say, things you're not allowed to say, but giving this sort of immigration status identity of an offender in no way prejudices a trial.
Of course it doesn't. And the police know that. And they are misusing their power and the threat of their power to lie to the rest of us.
And it is lying, even if it's lying by omission in some occasions, but sometimes it's outright lying. Do you think, though, that then everyone will be listening to the Prime Minister and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, who's reiterated the points today, that they should be giving information where they can? Because actually a lot of people suspect, and I'm among them, that when we had the lack of information about Axel Rudikabana back of Southport, that actually this was a government, directive. They say it wasn't. I'm sorry, I don't believe a word they say.
I mean, it may or may not have been directed centrally. I think one of the problems we have now is that so many arms of the state have been corrupted by this ideology. You see it in the approach the police take to these matters. You see it in how courts handle different kinds of situations, particularly the migration tribunals. So at some point, I think when the whole state is this corrupted, it doesn't even need to be directed centrally.
They know what they're supposed to do. The wink and the nod, and that there's no memo telling them this. It'll just be you know the score. That's why you're in that job. It's because you play along with this stuff. It is astounding, I think, to most people. But let's also talk about these claims that the prison system came within days of collapse more than once, according to an independent review by the former Chief Inspector of Prisons, Dame Anne Hours. The prison system came to a state of collapse on a number of occasions between autumn 23 and summer 24. There were even concerns, emergency, worrying concerns about during the last election campaign in 24 that they could collapse at that point, and they got to the point of having fewer than 100 places in male prisons. When they talk about state collapse, what do they mean by that?
Well, I mean, frankly, that the prison service, the whole prison system was on the verge of collapse.
What does that mean?
If we run out of prison cells, then someone will come to court and be sentenced to prison, and there's nowhere to send them in the whole country. Right. So then, really, there are a couple of options. You either keep them in cells at the court, or you send them to a police cell. And now there's been an agreement for a couple of years where the courts have said, we can't keep people in court cells. They don't have toilets. There's no water. They're not safe environments for overnight stays. But perhaps you would have to use them. Even if you did, there's not very many court cells in the country. Each court just has a handful of cells beneath it. So they would fill up very quickly. The police cells would fill up very quickly. And then effectively, at that point, the police have to stop arresting people. And
I'm not sure we'd notice that, to be honest with you. I'm not actually being, facetious. I don't think we'd notice if they stopped arresting people. Most police officers in this country don't arrest anyone from one year to the next.
Yeah, I think it would. It's certainly there are huge issues with the how few crimes actually get solved and how many crimes get ignored. But even then, I think if you imagine what happens if all the cells are full and someone commits a murder.
Yeah. Do we want them back on the streets? We saw early release, and we did see more crimes as a result of that. But fundamentally, there's no doubt we have a serious issue there. We need to build more prisons. Here's the thing: there's also a question about who gets put in them, because interesting press conference from Nigel Farage yesterday, and his new prison czar, effectively. This is Vanessa Frake, who's been a big friend of the show, fantastic former governor. Talks an awful lot of sense on a lot of these issues. She made some comments, basically suggesting that some trans women should be held in all-female jails. Now, this confuses things. When you say trans women, we're meaning prisoners who are male, who identify as if they were women. They're not women. That doesn't matter if they've got gender recognition certificate, whether they've post-op, pre-op. Most of them are just someone who says, actually, I think I might be a woman today, after they've been arrested for their sex crimes. That's the norm of these men. But should they be housed in the women's prison estate? I think the answer to that is a really simple no, never. I've been arguing with Nigel Farage on WhatsApp about that, as I told my audience yesterday I would do. She says that it should be on a case-by-case basis. He's saying, look, we haven't got a policy on this yet, but this is what her view, not the Reform's view. What do you think?
Yeah, I like Vanessa, and I think she does speak a lot of sense on lots of other issues, but she is completely wrong on this. And what I thought was strange yesterday was, she was talking about this in the press conference. Nigel came out and said that he defers to her and it's all about risk assessment. And that's just not a reasonable approach.
We know what the risk is. He's a man, the other cellmates are women, end of.
Yeah, and I think the reality here is everyone disagrees with Vanessa. So the British public opinion, if you look at recent polling, has completely shifted on this issue. 60+% of Brits don't want, men who say they're women in women's changing rooms. Yeah. They didn't poll on prisons, but it must be at least that.
Well, most people don't realise there are still a few men in English prisons, in women's prisons right now, and again, completely in breach of the Supreme Court ruling back in April. Nice to hear you. You're very clear cut on that, because it really isn't something that should be up for debate with anyone at all, is it? David Shipley, so appreciate your expertise and your comments there. Tom Slater, come back on any of that?
No, just finally, I think this was just such an unforced error from Reform, not least because you've got the Conservative Party or also other kind of upstart parties on the right.
Yeah, but Kemi Badenoch's sound on this.
No, exactly, who were desperate to, have an opportunity to take pot shots at him. I think he handed that to them unnecessarily easily.
No, I've been messaging him and saying, seriously, this is a vote loser. End of. Again, again, a lot of middle-aged men don't really understand why this is a big issue. The Andrew Neils who came to all this issues a bit late. No, I'm sorry. We do care about this stuff. Anyway, I'm delighted to say Ian Collins is back.
Hello.
Great to have you back.
Thank you very much.